Hello everyone, welcome to What If Issei Was Devil Among Devils Part 2. Before we start, this episode has a post-credit sense in the end, so don't miss it. Chapter 6. Issei-sama, something dire has come to my attention, Issei announced as their group met at the Kitetsu. His face was set into a severe frown as he stared at them. What is it, Issei? Issei asked. Have the fallen made a move? Strange, my seals haven't noticed anything, Tamamo mused. Whose ass are we kicking? Mordred demanded, slamming a fist onto the table. No, it is something far worse, I'm afraid, the white-haired man said, his voice grave. I'm afraid that we've run out of food. Is that all, Issei? Issei demanded. I'm sure we'll survive. Issei suddenly stood and stormed over to the fridge, throwing it open. Then please explain, Issei-sama, he said bluntly. How is it you intend to hold out until our next paycheck on nothing but konjac jelly, cucumbers and milk? The brown-haired boy deflated under his lieutenant's ire. Well, it's not like we're completely broke, right? He asked weakly. I've still got some money left in my wallet and I could always just grab some leftovers from work. Everyone glanced at the corner where two large trash bags full of hamburger wrappers sat, as though mocking them. We're gonna die, aren't we? Tamamo wailed. Do you intend to live on hamburgers and fries until then? Issei demanded, a vein popping on his forehead. What is this, supersize me? All that high-calorie, high-cholesterol food while you're young? I look forward to seeing you 10 years from now. I just hope your lifestyle doesn't kill you before then. I'm sorry for my incompetence, but you're the one who said we should swallow our pride until. Okay, I get it. Issei cried, leaping out of his seat. I'll figure something out. So, get off my back. With that said, he stormed out the apartment. As the door closed behind him, he let out a sigh and began walking in an attempt to clear his head. There was just too much going on. What with the fallen angels, school, work and dealing with Ria's group. True, Issei had a more stable job now, but teachers didn't make much either, especially with 4 mouths to feed. Ugh, with Tamamo and Mordred, it was like having kids. Did Issei and I just have our first fight? He shuddered at the thought and ignored the sudden urge to buy the white-haired man flowers in apology. He couldn't afford them anyway. He passed by a restaurant and saw an older woman shrieking at a teenage girl about some debt. Poor girl, he thought. As he got closer, however, he realized something. Wait, I know her. Walking over, he got a good look at her. Though she was kneeling in Caesar position, he could tell she was short, a little shorter than Mordred. Whereas the blonde girl was lean and willowy, this girl sturdily built. She had powerful, toned arms and legs that spoke of years of training. The girl had dark fuchsia-colored hair and dark pink eyes, accentuated by black Egyptian-esque mascara. Her hair fell to her shoulders and was partially tied into a ponytail on the left side of her head. Her attire consisted of a short, simple off-white dress. She was barefoot, with only a pair of black leg wraps and a beautiful gold anklet covering her legs. On her wrists was a pair of intricate silver arm guards depicting a bird. Although a little dirty, she looked like a normal, attractive high school girl. He knew better, of course. Hey. He called as he approached the one-sided argument. The woman turned and sneered at him. Oh ho, are you the guardian this girl spoke of? She demanded. Issei raised an eyebrow at the girl in question, who didn't look at him. Indeed, he said after a while. My name is Highschooldxd Issei. May I ask why you are screaming at her? She had the gall to eat here and leave without paying. The woman shouted. Issei sighed before rubbing the bridge of his nose. I'm sorry, the brown-haired boy offered before taking out his wallet. How much does she owe you? The woman replied by showing him the receipt. PT 10,000 yen, Issei shrieked. He looked up at the restaurant. It wasn't that fancy. How much did you eat? He demanded. The girl flinched and looked away. Well? The woman demanded. Issei swallowed. I am sorry, I can't afford that. He bowed to her. The woman sneered at him once again. Why am I not surprised? She growled. She glared down at the still kneeling girl before her. Well, I can't let you just leave, can I? Her eyes roamed over the girl's arm guards. Well, those bracelets of yours certainly look nice. Perhaps I should take those as payment. The girl flinched, rubbing the ornaments nervously. The woman then spotted the gold anklet the girl wore. Oh, that's a nice piece of jewelry you've got there. The girl, who had remained silent until now, suddenly let out a squeak of fear. She looked up at the woman. No, she looked up at Issei, her pink eyes pleading with him. The brown-haired boy sighed. He certainly knew why it was so important to her. He had been the one to give it to her, after all. The teenage boy sighed as he watched the sun slowly rise over the small desert village. He glanced behind him to see Alciel still asleep on the cot. I wonder how long it will be before my power returns completely, the former Demon King mused. He had modified his appearance somewhat. While he still possessed his forever messy hair, it was now brown in color. His eyes were also a dull brown. He had also modified his age, now in his late teens. He glanced at Alciel once more before deciding to head out for a stroll. I can feel some of my power returning, he thought. But nowhere near the power I once wielded. I'd wager I'm still around a strong low-class devil in terms of strength at the moment. He was broken out of his musing by the sound of heavy breathing and frantic footfalls. He quickly ducked behind a wooden stall that some merchant or other left behind. Once hidden, he glanced out to see a small, red-haired girl running as though her life depended on it. Well, running wasn't the proper word, she appeared to be stumbling about, more than anything. Curious, he glanced at her legs. Iron shackles. She was a slave. Suddenly a black-haired boy came barreling around the corner, a torch in one hand and a scimitar in the other. The girl shrieked as the boy grabbed a fistful of her hair and threw her to the ground. Did you really think you could escape? The boy sneered as he placed the scimitar at the girl's throat. Remember this, girl, you belong to me. You're a slave. You always will be, understand? Please, the girl cried. Someone help. The boy burst out laughing. No one's going to save you. He cackled. Even if someone were here, they couldn't do a damn thing about it. You're a slave. You have no rights. You're my possession. An object. That's not true, the girl whimpered. The boy spat in her face. It is, he stood and kicked her in the ribs. The girl shrieked in pain as he continued his assault. You. Understand. Now. No. One. Cares. Excuse me, a voice called out. But I care. I'd appreciate it if you stopped now. The boy stopped and looked at the person who'd interrupted him. Who the hell are you? He hefted his sword at him. Listen here, this girl is my slave. I have every right to do whatever the hell I want with her. He looked down and kicked the girl again for emphasis. The Demon King glanced at the sword and scoffed. Not anymore, because you're going to forget this girl ever existed. You're going to go home and have a nervous breakdown from the guilt of mistreating your slaves. The boy looked at him, ready to retort, but his eyes suddenly glazed over as an overwhelming presence invaded his weak mind. Drooling slightly, the boy wandered off, leaving the devil alone with the girl. What did you do to him? The girl asked, wincing from the pain. The devil kneeled next to her and lifted her into his arms. Just a little magic trick, he winked at her. He began walking off towards the ritzier part of town. Where are you taking me? The boy didn't answer as they eventually came upon a large fancy building. He walked up to the door and barged in. The fat man sitting at a desk with a large pitcher of wine in front of him glanced up at the intruders. Who the hell are you? The fat man demanded. He glanced at the girl in his arms. Isn't that Jamal's slave? Not anymore, the devil said. He reached into his pocket and tossed a large sack of gold coins onto the desk. I'm purchasing her freedom, good lord. He smiled down at the now wide-eyed girl. He left the fat lord to swoon over the amount of gold he'd just received. The sun was finally up in the sky and the town was coming to life once again. He spotted a jewelry merchant setting up shop nearby and walked over. Spotting a particularly intricate piece, he purchased it and carried the girl to a secluded alleyway. Gingerly lowering the girl to the ground, he kneeled before her and muttered a small spell. The shackles binding her legs shattered. The red-haired girl looked at her now unbound ankles in awe. She watched silently as the boy who had set her free gently rubbed the sores left by the shackles. Delicately, he clipped the beautiful anklet he'd bought in its place. You're free now, he said softly, smiling at her. Those shackles weren't suited for someone as beautiful as you. This is much more appropriate, don't you think? The girl flushed in embarrassment. She lifted her left leg and examined the anklet as it gleamed in the early morning sunlight. And you are beautiful, he continued, placing a hand on her head. A very beautiful person. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. The girl felt her eyes sting and the image of her savior began to blur. Desperate to keep him in sight, terrified that this was all just a cruel dream, she furiously rubbed the tears from her eyes. It's okay to cry, the boy said softly. Tell me, what's your name? The girl sniffed, still rubbing her eyes. Morgiana. The boy smiled warmly. Well, Morgiana, he said, helping her to her feet. I'll take care of you from now on. So don't you worry, okay? Morgiana looked up at him and for the first time since being sold into slavery. She smiled. Issei smiled slightly before bowing at the woman once more. I'm deeply sorry, he said. Perhaps I could work her department off. I'd be more than happy to wash dishes or do some heavy lifting. The woman glanced at him and Morgiana at his feet before grunting. Fine. Walk around to the back. I don't want you disturbing customers, got it? The woman walked back inside. Issei looked down at the girl and helped her to her feet. See? No sweat. Master, I apologize for this inconvenience. The girl immediately got back on the ground and groveled before him. I will accept any punishment you deem appropriate. Issei sighed as people passing by began to stare at them. Stop, Morgiana, he said, lifting her once again. Ugh, and to think you used to be so cute, too, running around screaming big brother, big brother. Whatever happened to that? The red-haired girl flushed in embarrassment. I just felt that it was inappropriate as I grew older. Issei smiled and patted her head gently. You'll always be my little sister, Morg. Morgiana suddenly pouted at him and stomped her foot on the ground. The impact caused a small crater to form. The brown-haired boy immediately backed off. Why was she suddenly angry? Anyway, Issei-sama. She seemed to stress his name for some reason. We'd better get to the kitchen before the manager becomes even angrier. Her master sighed before following. Issei sighed once again as he led the way home. After a few hours, they'd finally managed to pay off Morgiana's food bill. He'd had one hell of a time trying to explain how the tiny girl was able to lift entire piles of crates by herself. "We're back," he called out as they entered the apartment. "We?" Issei asked in confusion before he spotted the red-haired girl behind him. "Ah, Morgiana. Morg-chan?" Tamamo questioned. "Ah, you're finally here." She leapt from her seat and hugged the smaller girl happily. "About time," Mordred grunted. "I figured she'd have been the first one here." "Hello, Tamamo ni-chan," the Redhead greeted. "Hello Mordred. Hello Uncle Alcil. It's Issei in this country." Issei, however, was annoyed. Why does he still get the uncle while I get nothing? The others turned to him pityingly while the girl in question pouted once again. "What? Anyway, Issei-sama," Issei began. "Don't change the subject." The white-haired man ignored him. "I apologize for earlier today," he bowed. "I should not have placed the blame solely on you." "Yeah, you're supposed to be his most resourceful general." Tamamo cracked as she and Morgiana sat together at the kotatsu. "If anyone should be blamed, it's you." Issei sputtered indignantly. But it wasn't my fault either," he exclaimed. "Besides, the biggest money burner is Mordred buying gas for her bike." Everyone turned to the blonde, who just glared back at them, daring them to say something. They turned back to Issei. "This isn't fair," the white-haired man cried, tears streaming down his face. "Why couldn't I have been a beautiful girl?" "I never said that." Issei suddenly snapped, eyes glowing dangerously. "You didn't hear anything." "Agreed. Why couldn't I have been a beautiful girl? Why couldn't I have been a beautiful girl? Why couldn't I have been a beautiful girl?" They all turned to see Chachizero holding a tape recorder, a shit-eating grin on her face. "Why couldn't I have been a beautiful girl?" Issei slowly fell to his knees, despair evident on his face. "Why? Another servant appears. I pretty much summed up her past in the chapter, but I'll place another summary, for tradition's sake. Morgiana, Magi. The labyrinth of magic, born somewhere within the vast Persian Empire to a tribe of renowned hunter warriors called the Fanalis. The tribe was well known for their bright red hair and eyes, as well as their incredible physical strength. Morgiana was captured by slave traders at a young age and sold as the slave of a young lord named Jamil. This boy was known to be sadistic and mistreated his slaves on a daily basis. One day, Morgiana attempted to escape from her cruel master, but was quickly captured once again. Fortune seemed to shine upon her, however, as this incident was seen by the former king of demons, who would later go by the name Gary-stu Issei. The demon king purchased her freedom and promised to care for her until she could care for herself. As they traveled together throughout the Middle East, Issei trained her to utilize the great strength she'd been born with in order to protect herself. Eventually, it came the time that she was old enough to care for herself. By this time, however, they'd simply grown too close to part ways, and so Issei asked the girl if she'd like to stay together as a family. She'd agreed, as she had long since forgotten where her true family was, and he was the closest thing she had. On that day, Issei reincarnated her into a devil, and the two have remained together since. However, it seems that Morgiana has long since stopped seeing her master in a familial sense, but something more. Chapter 7. Issei resisted the urge to sigh as he glanced at his watch for the 5th time in the past 20 minutes. Was it so hard for someone to be on time? "Ah, well," he mused. "It's not as though I've got anything else to do." As it was the weekend, their group was free for the next 2 days. And due to their current financial situation, the girls had found it imperative to get jobs. Apparently Tamamo found one at a cosplay cafe downtown. Morgiana decided to make use of her physical strength at a construction site. They would pay her daily depending on how well she performed. Meanwhile, Issei was taking the day off to catch up on the housework that had been building up over the week. Mordred was off extorting money from her gang. And since McDonald's had closed for renovations, Issei had nothing to do. Then thankfully, depending on how one looked at it, he'd received a call from Amano Yuma. The girl asked whether or not he was free, and now here he was, leaning against a lamppost in the town square, waiting for his date to show up. Issei took another glance at the plastic watch he'd won out of a cereal box. What? It wasn't as though he could afford a real one. "Here, take a flyer," a voice spoke up. Issei glanced at the speaker. It was an older, dark-haired woman wearing some sort of strange vampire cosplay. He looked over the flyer with passing curiosity. It was a magic circle with a Gremory crest emblazoned smack dab in the center. He glanced up at the woman, a single eyebrow raised. She winked at him and gestured at the pamphlet once more before walking off. Issei turned it over to see a message written in the devil's language. Enjoy your date. Was she spying on him? He turned it over again and took a closer look at the circle. After several moments of inspection, he realized that it was a reverse summoning circle. It would allow him to instantly be transported to wherever it was keyed to, which in this case would most likely be the club room. They were especially useful for quick getaways. Why, isn't she thoughtful? He smirked just as his date finally arrived. I'm sorry. The girl exclaimed, bowing to him an apology. Were you waiting long? Oh, no, just about half an hour, I'd say. Issei said easily. The girl looked startled at his bluntness before flushing in embarrassment. Anyway, let's get going, yeah? Okay, Yuma agreed. Oh, Ice-kun. If it's not too much trouble, could we be back by sunset? Sunset? The brown-haired boy smirked at her. But the best part takes place at night. He watched in mild amusement as his words bounced around in her head, her face flushed red. What's that supposed to mean? Issei looked back at her in faux confusion. Why, the parties of course. He exclaimed. I hear there's going to be a huge one downtown tonight. He chuckled as left the black-haired girl sputtering behind him. Meanwhile, said girl was having conflicting thoughts. What the hell? He's not acting at all like I thought he would. Where's the meek polite boy I've been watching for the past few weeks? She took a good look at his attire. A dark leather jacket over a white shirt and dark jeans. His hair was also uncharacteristically gelled. The girl had to admit he looked good. And when he led her around the corner, she was shocked even further. Hop on, he said, throwing a leg over a sleek red Suzuki Hayabusa GSX 1300 RSA smirked at her as he donned a pair of black shades. It had taken a good 3 hours for him to convince Mordred to lend him her baby as she put it. He'd only gotten her to agree after promising to go riding with her next time. Now he had 2 dates to worry about after this. One with Tamamo and one with Mordred. Lucky me, Issei grumbled to himself, knowing full well that their finances would not survive such an assault. Is this yours? The shocked girl asked. Issei responded by patting the spot behind him. Come on, princess, he grinned. This is our first date. We've got to make it one to remember. Uma hesitated before climbing on behind him and wrapping her arms around his waist. With a roar of the engine, the pair took off at breakneck speed. He let out a laugh as the girl squeaked and tightened her grip on him. This'll be fun, Issei grinned. Thank you for your patronage. Tamamo said, bowing politely at her customers retreating back. Wow, you sure are popular, Tamamo-san. A short brown-haired girl exclaimed. The fox girl grinned at her. But of course, was her haughty reply. Anyone would be eager to be served by one such as myself, Chiho-chan. Tamamo was currently in her cosplay outfit, which consisted of a tight black bodice with frilly gray endings and tied with bright yellow straps. The arms of her outfit were loose and allowed her free movement. A pair of black stockings covered her legs, leaving only the skin of her thighs exposed. Her dark blue hair ribbon had been replaced by a turquoise one and a small top hat perched perilously atop her head. The outfit left much of her cleavage exposed. Which was probably the biggest contributor to her popularity, her natural beauty and supernatural allure aside. The girl she was currently speaking to was Sasaki Chiho, one of Issei's co-workers. She had short brown hair that fell to her chin and chocolate-colored eyes. Her hair sported 2 pink ribbons on either side of her head. Her outfit consisted of a dark blue blazer with a plaid ribbon tied at her neck and a short green skirt. She wore black knee-high socks and brown leather shoes. But the biggest eye-catcher was her assets. They're huge. Tamamo mentally raged. How does such a tiny girl have such huge breasts? Taiho, of course, was completely oblivious to the fox girl's jealous ravings. You look so mature. The girl gushed. Moo. I'm so jealous. The shop's doorbell chimed, drawing the fox girl's attention away from their chat. Welcome. Tamamo exclaimed cheerfully, only for her face to drop upon seeing who just stepped in. Oh, it's you. Thanks, Mordred said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. What do you want? The fox asked in a bored tone. No money, no service. I've got money. The blonde retorted before snapping her fingers. Immediately, a bald man in a leather jacket appeared, handing her a 10,000 yen note. The man then bowed at them before dashing back outside. The other 2 girls stared after the retreating gang member before turning back to the smug blonde. A table for one, the knight demanded. I'm sorry, we seem to have run out of tables. Like hell. Please, miss, you're disturbing the other customers, Tamamo said calmly. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Fuck you. The blonde girl snarled, looking ready to summon her sword at any moment. Tamamo-san? Chiho asked meekly. Please don't fight. I don't mind sharing my table with her if she doesn't mind. HMPH, Mordred grunted. Well, at least some people have manners. You're one to talk, Tamamo growled just as her smartphone began letting out a series of rings. She reached into her pocket and pulled it out. The girl cleaned the screen off before reading the message she'd just been sent. I see, she murmured, powering down her phone and pulling out a pen and notepad. Alright Blondie, what do you want? The banana spit? The spit beer float? Or the spit parfait? Taiho slowly sank down into her seat as their argument intensified. Where did it go wrong? Yuma wondered, resting her cheek against Issei's back as he drove them back into the city. Or perhaps a better question would be why did it all go so right? She had intended to spend a boring day with an equally boring boy. She was supposed to use every moment of boredom she'd suffered as motivation to kill him. Instead she'd found herself following him all over the prefecture, bouncing from venue to venue. He'd taken her to every place she could have imagined and against all reasoning, she'd found herself having fun with him. And that terrified her. Highschooldxd Issei had to die. That was her assignment. It was the sole reason she'd asked him out in the first place. And here she was getting attached to him, the boy she was supposed to murder. Unconsciously, her grip on his waist tightened, prompting Issei to raise an eyebrow. You okay? He called back to her. She didn't reply for several moments. Yeah, I'm fine, it's just whatever she was about to say was interrupted by the sound of several other motorcycles surrounding them. Boy, bastard. One of the riders shouted over the wind. Issei vaguely recognized him as one of Mordred's biker gang members. Aneki told us you had a date today. She said not to worry about it, another shouted. But we can't just let you off the hook like that. Isn't she enough for you? The first one, who appeared to be their leader, cried. Die. Boy, Yuma. Issei shouted. Hold on tight. What are you going to do? Oh, she shrieked as he suddenly accelerated. The others gave chase, but, shit, he's pretty good. One of them cried as Issei easily weaved through the evening traffic. Of course, another shouted back. I'd expect nothing less from one of Aneki's friends. Stop admiring him and catch up to him. The leader shouted. But by then the brown-haired boy was too far ahead of them. He swerved around the corner, spotting his destination just ahead. He vaguely heard Yuma squeak behind him as he drove right over the edge of the highway and into the park some 15 meters below, expertly positioning the bike to soften the impact. Immediately swerving behind a tree, Issei killed the engine and waited silently. Only when sounds of their pursuers' engines faded into the distance did he allow himself to relax. He glanced at the still shocked Yuma behind him and began chuckling. The black-haired girl was broken out of her daze by the sound and looked up at his grinning face. Her face suddenly felt hot, but surely it was just from the humidity. She clutched at her chest, where she could feel her heart pounding furiously. Surely it was just from the excitement of the chase that had just ended. But as he smiled at her she wasn't so sure. Slowly, she found herself laughing with him. Issei helped her off the bike and propped it up against the tree. Taking her by the hand, he led her over to the fountain and plopped down. Yuma sat down beside him. Well, here we are, he said. When she gave him a confused glance, he leaned in closer to her. You wanted me to take you to the park at sunset, right? Did you have something you wanted to do here? Somehow, she seemed to flush and pale at the same time. Yes. Issei asked, his smile warm. As she looked into his eyes, she seemed to hesitate even more. Would you? Wait. I almost forgot. He said with a sheepish grin before reaching into his pocket and bringing out a thin silver chain with a small heart dangling from it. It's not much, but here. He took her hand and clipped it to her wrist. It's a charm bracelet, he explained. I've had it for some time now, but I've never bothered to buy more charms for it. So, I'll give it to you and I'll get you a new charm for every date we go on, alright. What a stupid gift and yet. So, what was it you were going to say? He asked with an easygoing smile. Would you take me on another date someday? Issei didn't get a chance to respond before she suddenly leaned forward, capturing his lips with her own. The kiss lasted for several moments. It was neither chaste nor passionate. It was hesitant but sincere. And in both of their minds, it was perfect. As they broke away, Issei smiled at her once again. You can count on it. Yuma graced him with a small smile of her own before stepping away from him. I had a lot of fun today, Ice-kun, she said. See you soon. And with that, she rushed away. Issei watched her go, fully aware that he was being approached from behind. Well, you sure seemed to enjoy that, Tamamo said dryly. I would be lying if I said I didn't, Issei admitted. He glanced at her outfit. What are you wearing? Tamamo, who was still in her cosplay, did a little twirl and winked at him. You like? It's my work uniform. Can't say I don't, he said neutrally as Mordred walked over, pushing her bike towards them. You know what to do from here, right? The fox waved him off. Yeah. Take this, Issei handed her the reverse summoning circle Riaz had given him earlier today. Use it in the case of an emergency. Tamamo took the proffered pamphlet and gave him a mock salute. Poof. From the smoke, a pigeon flew out in the direction Yuma had left. Issei watched it go for a while until the sound of an engine revving up behind him drew his attention. Where to, master? Mordred asked as she donned a pair of sunglasses. The club room, please, Issei replied as he mounted the bike behind her. If something happens, Tamamo will most likely appear there. Plus, I believe Ria's wishes to know how it went. The blonde shrugged before slamming on the gas. Rainer glanced about nervously as she entered the church. Ever since the exorcists had been found dead beneath the altar, everyone had been on edge when coming and going. Except Fried. He would just squeal gleefully whenever the harsh scent of death washed over him. He creeped her out, to be honest. She would have killed him herself if Donasek hadn't insisted that they needed him. Well, how did it go? A buxom woman with long, navy blue hair asked. It was Kalwerner, one of her fellow fallen angels. Did he squeal like a pig when you got him? It was Middled, a younger angel with dirty blonde hair tied up in pigtails. A tall, middle-aged man wearing a trench coat and fedora watched her reaction carefully and apparently found something unsatisfactory. You didn't kill him. Donasek accused. When she flinched, his suspicion was confirmed. Why? The black-haired angel quickly compassed herself. We still don't know for sure whether or not he possesses the sacred gear, she said tersely. I see no reason to kill anyone if they don't possess it. I don't believe it, Middle giggled. Don't tell me you actually fell for that guy. Like hell. Rainer cried, though the blush on her face betrayed her. The others broke out into laughter. Listen, Ray, Kalwerner began, wiping a tear from her eye. He's just a human. You'll get over it sooner or later. Yeah, the blonde girl continued, still giggling. Once the plan succeeds, I'm sure Azazel-sama will be all over you. Rainer smiled weakly before it slid into a frown. Still, I don't think he's carrying the gear. Donasek heaved an exasperated sigh. Well, lucky you, he smirked. 'Cause we've just confirmed it. He's not carrying it. The black-haired girl visibly relaxed after hearing his words. So it's the girl, then? The sole male of their group grinned. Sure is, he nodded. I saw her at that new cafe that opened downtown. Unlike you, I'm not going to risk getting attached. I plan on dealing with her right now. As he said this, a pair of black angel wings sprouted from his shoulders. I'll be back late, Donasek said as he took off out the window. Don't wait up. Unknown to them, a small pigeon had witnessed the entire conversation. With a look of worry, the bird disappeared in a flash of red light. Welcome back, Issei-kun, Rias greeted them as he and Mordred entered the club room. She and Akeno were the only ones there. Kiba and Kaneko were likely off providing services. Ara, Akeno said, her voice teasing. I hear you were on a date, Issei-kun. How cruel to Tamamo Dono and Mordred Dono. I imagine they're already planning to pay me back in full, the brown-haired boy grumbled. He winced as the blonde girl elbowed him in the stomach. And how did your date go, Issei-kun? Rias questioned curiously. Surprisingly well, he answered. Though it was obvious she had been planning something, it seemed to fall apart as the date progressed. I saw the conflict in her eyes before she left. Ara, how romantic, the black-haired Quen said, placing a hand to her cheek. A forbidden love, not that she knows it's forbidden. Not quite as forbidden as you might think, Issei admitted. You know the fallen angel Shemhaz-I. He's one of the Grigori, isn't he? The vice-governor general, he nodded. He actually married a devil woman some time ago. You're kidding. The two girls looked shocked. I'm not, Issei smirked. I don't know if she was a member of the Pillars, but Azazel informed me that she was indeed a devil. But why would Azazel tell you, one of his enemies, this? Akeno asked with a dark frown marring her lovely features. Issei raised an eyebrow. She seemed unusually hostile about this. Did she have something against fallen angels? Perhaps that was a stupid question. All devils disliked angels, fallen or otherwise, on principle alone. Of all the three factions' leaders, Azazel is the most peaceful, Issei explained. At the end of the Great War, he and his Grigori were the first to retreat. He has been adamantly anti-war since then. Of course, not all the Grigori agreed with this, Mordred added from the couch she was currently lounging on, casually swinging her leg as though she owned the place. This is why we're currently trying to hunt down a traitor. And to be honest, I think I know who it is, Issei muttered. Really, who is it? Rias asked, but the boy shook his head. I'm not going to make any accusations, he said firmly. Not until we've got proof. But I can tell you that during the war, one of Azazel's subordinates was particularly vicious in his methods. Rias looked like she wanted to say something, but was interrupted by a magic circle suddenly shimmering into existence. The Mamo has returned, Issei said, standing up. Mordred copied his action, her earlier relaxed attitude gone. As the light faded, they saw the fox girl with an unusually serious expression. They're making their move, she reported. The male of their group is going after the true sacred gear user. She looked at Issei solemnly. He's going after Chiho. The fox girl suddenly clutched her chest, wide-eyed. What's wrong? Issei asked in concern. They've made contact, she hissed. We have to move now. Issei nodded. Prepare for transport. We'll go with you, Rias offered. The boy didn't bother to reply, instead he had whipped out his cell phone. Ashia, Issei barked when the other man picked up. It's time. You know what to do. He hung up and turned to the others who had gathered around Tamamo. Let's go. In a flash of blue light, the group appeared in the residential area of the city. The smell of blood permeated through the air and they immediately spotted a crumpled form on the floor. "Taiho!" Issei exclaimed. He cradled her in his arms and felt her neck. Her pulse was weakening. "Tamamo." "I'm on it," the fox nodded. She paused. "Master, the fallen angel is still in the area. You can probably catch him." Issei glanced at Chiho still in his arms before nodding. "Alright, take care of her, Tamamo." He gently handed the prone girl over before standing. "Riaz, Akeno, assist Tamamo." Iridid nodded. "Very well." Ara, the black-haired girl said sensually. "So aggressive today, Issei-kun. But if you insist." Issei turned to the blonde girl beside him. "Mordred, go." The knight nodded before crouching low and disappearing in a show of pure speed. The brown-haired boy glanced at them once more before disappearing as well. Tamamo returned her attention to the wounded girl in her arms before closing her eyes and beginning a healing ritual. Riaz assisted her, channeling her own healing magic, while Akeno set to cleaning up the blood that had splattered on the walls and sidewalk. After several minutes, Tamamo opened her eyes. There was something wrong. "She's not responding," she said urgently, causing Ria's brow to furrow. She placed her fingers to the girl's neck. "Her pulse is weakening as well," the Redid muttered. "Is her body resisting the healing spell?" "Damn it." Tamamo growled. "Don't you dare die on me, Chiho. I promised master that I'd take care of you and I refuse to lie to my master." "I have an idea," Ria said, prompting Tamamo to raise an eyebrow at her. The girl's voice sounded far too sly. "And I have a feeling you know what it is." "You want her," Tamamo said bluntly. Riaz merely smiled. The fox glared at her for a moment before sighing. Riaz obviously wanted to turn Chiho into a devil. While doing so would most likely assist in their healing, it would also turn the girl into her servant. While not ideal, Tamamo knew her master possessed no evil pieces and he likely didn't want Riaz knowing that he could reincarnate people without them. At least she knew Chiho would be serving under a kind master. The Gremory clan was well known for their great affection for their servants, after all. "I suppose we have no choice, then," Tamamo muttered. She nodded at the Redid. "Do it." "That was way too easy," Donasik mused to himself as he flew back towards the church at a leisurely pace. "I'll have to rub it into Rainer's face when I get back. Next time, she can't get attached to the target." However, in his musing, he failed to notice a figure approaching him at blinding speed until a searing pain surged through his back. "Arg." He grunted in agony as he suddenly found himself crashing into the ground. He looked back at his wings to see a long cut on both of them. It wasn't enough to cause permanent damage, but it was more than enough to keep him from flying. "That was way too easy," a voice complained, unknowingly copying his earlier thoughts. He looked up to see a figure, completely encased in a suit of heavy red and silver armor. A horned helm obscured the knight's face, leaving him unable to tell his assailant's gender. "Hey, angel boy, if it were up to me, you'd be dead already. But fortunately for you, we need you alive." "Who the hell are you?" He could feel her aura. It was incredibly powerful. It was terrifying, actually. "Are you a devil?" "Unfortunately, I'm not at liberty to discuss things with you," the figure said, placing a sword at his neck. "That would be my job," another voice called out. Donasik looked up to see the same boy Rainer had become smitten with approaching them. "You?" he cried. "But you're just a human. Appearances can be deceiving, Detenshi-san. And what the hell do you want with me?" Donasik demanded. "We haven't done anything to you." "Not to me, no," Issei admitted. "But you've brazenly attacked one of my friends, who happens to be a sacred gear user. I thought Azazel wanted to study sacred gears. Wouldn't killing their users be detrimental to that?" "We had orders to kill that girl," the injured fallen angel growled. "Wait, why am I explaining myself to you?" He flexed his fingers, wanting to summon a light spear, but the sword at his neck prevented him from doing anything. "You're right," Issei chuckled. "You technically don't have to answer to me." He smirked. "But I know someone you do have to answer to." The fallen angel sneered at him. "And who would that be?" "That would be me, Donasik," yet another voice called out. The older man paled upon hearing this voice and they turned to see a magic circle appearing several meters behind them. From within the circle, 3 figures emerged. "Azazel-sama," Donasik whimpered. "I apologize for taking so long," Issei-sama, Ashiya said, bowing slightly. "I was picking up Morgiana when you called me." The Redid in question was currently gazing down at Donasik, an emotionless expression on her face. "Yeah, sorry for being late," Azazel said cheerfully. "I was really surprised when Alciel suddenly showed up in the middle of my office. I almost attacked him, you know." "If you did, Morgiana would have kicked your face in," Issei said with a smirk. Azazel glanced at the tiny girl and shuddered. He knew firsthand how powerful those limbs of hers were. "Wait," Donasik whispered. "Did you say Alciel?" "As in, one of the great angel generals that sided with Lucifer when he became a devil." "The very same," Azazel smiled as 10 pure black wings appeared from Ashiya's back. The white-haired man stared at the fallen man coldly. Issei turned his terrified gaze towards Issei. "And you're his master?" he whimpered. "But Alciel only served one person. He's dead. You're supposed to be dead. Who the hell are you?" Issei chuckled before crouching down to his level. His eyes suddenly turned burning red. "Quite frankly, I'm your worst nightmare," he whispered as a truly demonic grin stretched across his face. Suddenly, an overwhelming force slammed against Issei's mind, causing his eyes to roll back and making him stammer incoherently before blacking out. There was silence for several moments before Azazel finally spoke up. "Well, I thank you for your cooperation," he nodded at Issei. "I'll be taking him into custody for interrogation. You should be aware that the other fallen angels remain active," Issei said, his eyes returning to their dull brown color. "This one acted independently tonight." The Governor General nodded. "I'm aware of that," he replied. "Their assignment was to observe the sacred gear user, but it seems that whoever is giving them their orders deviated from mine. You know what she carries, don't you?" Issei said accusingly. The Governor grinned at him cheekily. "I do, but I'll let you figure it out." He cackled. "Hopefully we can get a name from this one," Issei remarked before Issei could retort. "Issei, his name was." Azazel nodded. "I'll send a message to the others stationed here that Issei was recalled to avoid questions about his disappearance." "Have you heard anything about a nun from Europe coming here?" Issei suddenly asked. The Governor frowned thoughtfully. "No, can't say I have," he admitted. "Why do you ask?" "The others seem to have plans involving her," the brown-haired boy replied. Azazel frowned. "I don't know anything about this," he muttered. "This traitor must be growing bolder. He's acting completely independently from me now. I'll keep an eye on them," Issei said. "And I'll keep you informed if I learn anything." "Thank you," the Governor nodded. He pointed at the unconscious Issei, who began levitating. Walking a short distance away, a magic circle appeared beneath them. "I'll leave it to you prefer going by Issei nowadays, right?" The brown-haired boy nodded as the Azazel and Issei disappeared in a flash of light. With a small sigh, Issei turned to his gathered servants. "Well, let's go check on the others." He had sensed a large infusion of devil magic earlier, so he already had a feeling of what had transpired in his absence. As they rounded the corner, he was not surprised to see Chiho still unconscious in Ria's arms. Tamamo immediately bowed to him submissively as he came into sight. "Master, I was unable to heal Chiho," she said shamefully. "Ria's Harem had to reincarnate her. I apologize for this failure." Issei chuckled slightly. "It's fine, Tamamo," he said easily. "Quite frankly, I already suspected Ria's intentions when she asked to come with us." Ria's grinned at him. "Sorry, Issei-kun," she said with a coy smile. "I'm a devil, greed is in my blood. I likely would have done the same were I in your shoes," Issei nodded. "And what piece did she take?" "I was actually quite shocked," Ria's replied. "She actually took up all 8 of my PAWN pieces." Issei raised an eyebrow in surprise. "Her sacred gear must be incredible," he remarked. He put on a mock frustrated expression. "And I just gave her to you." Ria's giggled. "Sorry, first come, first served," she teased. "Anyway, she's completely healed now. Normally, a wound like that would take quite a while to heal, but Tamamo-san's healing ritual worked wonders." Issei nodded. "Yes, she's quite talented," he said, causing the fox girl to perk up at his praise. "You should probably get her home. I presume you already know where that is?" The red-haired girl nodded. "I memorized the homes of all your co-workers," she admitted. "As a precaution." "Then I'll leave it to you," he said before nodding towards Ashia. The white-haired man nodded in return and summoned a magic circle beneath them. "See you Monday, Ria-senpai, Akeno-senpai." With that, the group of 5 disappeared in a flash of blue light. "Ugh, what an exhausting day," Issei sighed as he plopped down at the kotatsu. "It certainly was exciting, wasn't it?" Ashia sighed as he, too, sat down. "Not exciting enough," Mordred grunted. "That fallen angel was such a pansy. I need more action than that." "So long as it ends favorably, I'm fine with it," Issei shrugged. "If Issei-sama is happy, I'm happy," Morgiana said quietly. "Same here," Tamamo chimed in. "Nah, master. I made a lot of money off tips today." "Oh, did you?" Issei smiled. The fox girl grinned at him, reaching into a pocket hidden in her sleeve and pulled out a wad of cash. "Yup, 15,000 yen," she bragged. Issei patted her on the head. "Great job," he said as Mordred scoffed. "Please, I managed to get 25,000. Extortion is a criminal offense, Mordred-chan," the fox girl taunted, though her glare was icy. Issei pointedly ignored their impending argument. "And how did you do, Morgiana?" Iridide glanced at him before placing her pay on the table. The entire group froze as they stared at the stack of 10,000 yen notes. "How much is that?" Mordred stammered. "I thought you were doing construction work." Morgiana shrugged. "I'm a hard worker." Ashia snorted. "I saw what she was doing," he said. "She single-handedly finished the construction. But all they had this morning was the foundation." the blonde cried. Issei nodded. I know, he ignored Mordred's furious, incoherent muttering. She even managed to get a contract with the supervisor. Mord-chan. Tamamo embraced the redeed, tears rapidly falling down her face. With this, we can go eat a decent meal at last. Morgiana awkwardly patted her on the back as the fox girl sobbed all over her shoulder. Alright, Issei nodded. In celebration, why don't we go out to eat tonight? What do you guys want? Sukiyaki. Tamamo cried. Issei looked at the others. Issei and Morgiana didn't mind, and Mordred was still stammering incoherently. Alright, sukiyaki it is, he smiled. As the group left to go eat, a certain puppet was left behind to wonder why she hadn't been invited to any of the day's events. The fact that she still reeked of exorcist blood was completely irrelevant. Chapter 8. Hello, my name is Sasaki Chiho, the brown-haired girl bowed to the class. I've just transferred here from the nearby public school. Please take care of me. Well, I suppose this was only to be expected, Issei mused as the brown-haired girl took a seat next to him. How are you, Chiho? He asked quietly, to avoid the teacher's notice. The shorter girl smiled at him hesitantly. I'm okay, she replied in an equally quiet voice. Ria-senpai said that she would explain everything today and got me transferred here this morning. Issei nodded. She asked me to take you to the clubroom after school, he told her. You'll be meeting everyone else there. Chiho nodded in acceptance before turning to Tamamo and Mordred. I didn't know you two went to this school as well. I'm glad you'll be attending here, Kai-cha, and the fox girl grinned. Mordred simply grunted and continued staring out the window. As Chiho and Tamamo chatted quietly, Issei's mind drifted towards Morgiana. She'd been enrolled as a first year and he was slightly worried about how she was being treated. He knew she could handle herself in a fight, but his gaze turned towards Masuda and Motohama. Just because those two happened to be in his class didn't mean there weren't other perverts out there. And if any of them tried to touch his super kawaii Yamato, his classmate suddenly scooted away from him as he began emitting an aura of death. Back at the apartment, Chachizero suddenly felt like laughing, so she did. So caught up in her laughter, she didn't notice the shadowy figure silently land behind her until it was too late. Well, that was certainly entertaining, Mordred commented as she led the group towards the clubroom with a spring in her step. Issei trailed behind them, grumbling darkly. Why did I have to stand outside? He grumbled. Why didn't you do something, Tamamo? I decided you needed the punishment, the fox girl sniffed. Siskin. Issei actually tripped. What did you call me? He demanded. Siskin, Mordred agreed. He glared at her. I'm not a Siskin. The brown-haired boy growled. I didn't know that Issei-san is a Siskin, Chiho muttered. I'll have to shift my strategy. You too, Chiho, Issei growled. Is no one on my side? I'm on your side, Morgiana spoke up, making Issei smile at her warmly. Ani-chan. She finally called him her brother again, but why couldn't he stop crying? Welcome back, are you okay? Riaz asked in concern when they stepped inside. It seemed everyone was here today. Even Issei was waiting for them. They'll be fine, the blonde-haired girl said offhandedly as Issei quietly sniffed behind her. We brought your new pet. Chiho stepped forward gazing at all the new faces nervously. Hello, Ria-senpai, she said, bowing politely. Thank you for enrolling me here. The crimson-haired devil waved it off. It was nothing, she smiled. Now, Chiho, I believe you'd like some explanations. The brown-haired girl nodded. Oh, on Sunday, you mentioned something about devils. Riaz nodded. Yes, Chiho, she said, unfurling her wings behind her. I'm a devil, as is everyone in this room. Even Issei-san? Was her meek question. The brown-haired boy nodded but didn't unfurl his wings. Indeed, I am, Chiho, Issei said. The man who attacked you Saturday night was a being known as a fallen angel, angels that have fallen from grace due to their sins. But you should know, Chiho. When we tried to heal you, your body rejected the process for some reason. The girl's eyes widened. Then how am I still alive? In order to save you, I had to reincarnate you into one of us, the crimson-haired princess replied, watching her reaction. So I'm a devil now? Chiho asked after several moments. You're taking this rather well, Riaz noted. Normally people panic when told they've become a demon. The small girl smiled slightly. Well, I figured if Issei-san is a devil, you can't be all bad, she answered sincerely. Said boy smiled at her. I see, Riaz remarked, smirking at Issei. And you saved my life, the brown-haired girl bowed to her. Thank you. You're welcome, the redeed nodded. But, it came at a price. The moment I reincarnated you, you became my servant. So in exchange for my life, I have to serve you? Chiho asked, her voice meek. You're actually quite lucky that Riaz was the one to reincarnate you, Kai-chan, Issei told her gently. Her family is well known for their extraordinary affection towards their servants. Yes, welcome to my family, Chiho, Riaz said with a warm smile. Thank you, the brown-haired girl bowed. I owe you my life. I'll do my best to live up to your expectations. That's all I can ask you, Rias nodded. Now, I believe it is time for introductions. The Keno stood and bowed to her. I am Himejima Keno. Kiba smiled his prince smile at her. I'm Kiba. Nice to meet you, Chiho-san. How'd you Kaneko? The white-haired girl nodded at her. They are all my servants, Rias explained. She gestured towards Issei. And Issei-kun is another high-class devil. He is also in our club for convenience's sake. Issei smiled at her. Welcome, Chiho, he nodded. I believe you've already met my servants, but we'll introduce ourselves again. He gestured towards Ishiya. Shiro Ishiya, the white-haired man nodded. Nice to finally meet you, Chiho-san. Hello, Ishiya-sensei. My name is Tamamo no Mei, the fox girl winked. But just call me Tamamo. Why you're the Tamamo no Mei, Chiho asked in shock. The one and only, Tamamo grinned. She patted Mordred on the shoulder. This is Molly Knight, but you've probably heard about her under the name Mordred Pendragon. The brown-haired girl's brow furrowed in thought. Mordred, she muttered. I think I've heard that name. Oops, guess not. The fox grinned. The blonde girl growled at her. I don't believe any of you've met Morgiana here, Issei said quickly. The shorter girl bowed. Nice to meet you, Ria's brow furrowed. Morgiana, huh? She muttered. No surname. I believe I've heard of her, Kiba stated, though he looked unsure himself. She was in 1001 Nights. Specifically, The Legend of Alibaba and the 40 Thieves. Ah, yes. She was a slave, if I recall the legend correctly, Rias nodded. Morgiana said nothing. She was indeed a slave, Issei interjected. But she was freed long before meeting Alibaba. Alibaba-san was a good friend of mine, Morgiana spoke, her voice quiet. He, Aladdin and I went on many adventures together. I see, Rias nodded. So once again, the legend was distorted over time. I'm not surprised. The crimson-haired girl stood from her desk and smiled. Anyway, I welcome you to the Occult Research Club, Chiho-san and Morgiana-san. Thank you, Chiho paused. But you. You said that Issei-san is a high-class devil. What would that make me? You, a newly reincarnated devil, are automatically low-class, Rias answered. If it makes you feel any better, you don't have to stay a low-class devil forever, Tamamo offered, seeing her dejected look. With hard work you can be promoted to mid-class, high-class or even ultimate class. What class are you, Tamamo-san? Chiho asked curiously. Technically I'm still low-class, the fox girl said. But that's just because I've never bothered to take the promotion test. What? Kiba looked shocked. Why not? Because I'm perfectly content with the way my life is now, Tamamo shrugged. I serve my master. Always have, always will. I have served Issei-sama since the beginning, Ishiya explained with a humble smile. I have no need for titles or glory. I have dedicated my life to serving him and that is what I shall do until the day die. The same holds true for me, Morgiana added. Issei-sama removed the chains that bound me and gave me wings. Mordred grunted but nodded nonetheless. I wouldn't mind seeing a little more action, she muttered. But not once did I regret my choice in following him. The others looked awed by their unflinching loyalty, causing Issei to rub the back of his head in embarrassment. Anyway, he said, breaking the silence. I think you should aim for becoming a high-class devil, Chiho. You really think I can do it? I know you can, Issei nodded. Chiho looked up at him, a determined gleam in her eyes. Alright, I'll work hard at becoming a high-class devil. The girl exclaimed. She paused. How exactly do I do that? Well, there are several ways, Rias began. The first way is the easiest, but also takes the longest. It involves granting wishes and making contracts with humans, Akeno told her. The number of contracts you hold proves your skill to the higher-ups. Once they feel you've acquired enough, they allow you to take the promotion test. The second method is through military accomplishments, Ishiya said. Doing great deeds during times of crisis will gain you a lot of respect. This is the fastest way, but since we are currently in a ceasefire with the other factions, this method is a lot less likely than it once was, Kiba explained. The final method is through raiding games, Rias continued. Raiding games are matches between two opposing peerages. A peerage is a group of servants headed by a high-class devil such as myself or Issei-kun. They've become a very popular way to settle disputes and are seen as a source of entertainment for others. If you're good, you get promoted, Kaneko said. Unfortunately, only mature devils can participate in raiding games, Rias said. I'm not yet of age, so that route is blocked. That leaves us with the first method. So I have to grant wishes? Chiho asked. Rias nodded. More like providing service, she explained. The client will tell you what they want and if it is within your power to do so, you will grant their wish, for a price, that is. The price can be anything. Money, items or favors owed to us. The goal is to form a contract with the clients and have them summon us repeatedly. What kind of wishes do you provide? Well, I get less jobs than the others, given my higher ranking, Rias said. My contracts usually involve examining cursed objects. Akeno's contracts are usually from executives of corporations. Kiba usually contracts older women who have him cook and clean for them. Kaneko's contracts usually ask her to play video games or do cosplay. The brown-haired girl nodded. And what about Issei-san? I actually haven't had a contract in years, Issei admitted. We've been traveling for so long, having long-term contracts wasn't really an option. Understandable, Ria said. Now, Chiho, there's more I wish to explain to you. Like I said earlier, the man that attacked you was a fallen angel. That's right, Chiho exclaimed. You said something about factions. That's right, Ashiya nodded. In the beginning, there were only two factions. Heaven and Hell. Back then, there was open hostility between us, but no outright violence. That all changed when the original Lucifer fell from heaven, Rias continued. When he fell, he brought a third of the angels with him. However, Lucifer sought refuge in the underworld and became a sort of devil-fallen angel hybrid. But many of the fallen angels still viewed the devils as enemies and refused to join Lucifer. Issei took over. When heaven demanded that they relinquish Lucifer, the leaders of hell refused. Angered by the refusal, they attempted to take him back by force. And so sparked the great war between our three factions, Rias said. A war between the devils, angels and fallen angels. It lasted for eons and ended only recently with the deaths of our original leaders. Who were your original leaders? Chiho asked. Their names were Leviathan, Mammon, Asmodeus, Belphegor, Beelzebub, Lucifer and Satan. They were known as the seven princes of hell, the crimson-haired girl said reverently. One for each deadly sin. Lucifer was the last to join them under the sin of pride. Each of them held unimaginable power, Akeno said, bowing her head. But one stood above the rest. Satan, Lord of Wrath, the king of demons, the devil himself, Rias was practically gushing at this point. Each of Issei's servants was smirking at him as he fidgeted uncomfortably. He is said to have been the single most powerful devil to ever exist, that his power rivaled that of God himself. But if he was so powerful, how did he die? Chiho asked, oblivious to Issei's discomfort. No one knows, Kiba said, shaking his head. Some say that it took God's own might to strike him down. Others say he simply grew too powerful and destroyed himself. They never recovered a body, Akeno said. So we have no idea what happened. Just then, a phone rang in the background and the black-haired girl excused herself to answer it. His death may have brought an end to the war, but it was a huge blow to our people, Rias continued solemnly. We were left completely leaderless and at the mercy of our enemies. Only 5 of the original Mau had left behind descendants. They were Beelzebub, Leviathan, Asmodeus, Belphegor and Lucifer. Beelzebub, Leviathan, Asmodeus and Lucifer's descendants took control of the underworld and wished to continue waging war against the other factions, Ashiya continued for her. Belphegor's descendants were against further war and refused to get involved. They may have had the same blood, Ria scowled. But they lacked the power and talent of their ancestors. Our people were decimated in the battles that followed. There were originally 72 great families among us known as the 72 Pillars. That number was reduced to a mere 34 during their rule. But by then, the other factions had taken heavy casualties as well, Issei stated, happy to be away from the subject of him. The fallen angels were the first to retreat, followed by the angels. That left the devils with a broken government to deal with. It was then that a civil war broke out, Ria stated. The family of Belphegor gathered powerful individuals to oust the false Mau as they were called. One of them was Ajuka. He had invented an ingenious method of reincarnating other beings into devils in order to repopulate. The then current Mau rejected this idea, however, Kiba said. They felt that reincarnating other beings into devils was a disgrace. They and their faction adamantly refused the plan. The Belphegor and their faction supported the plan. Roygun Belphegor, the current head of the family gathered 4 others, Rias continued. Serafol Citri, Ajuka Astareth, Falbium Glaciolabolas and Surzich's Gremory. G. Gremory? Chiho asked in shock. Rias nodded, somewhat reluctantly. My brother, she said. Anyway, Roygun's faction eventually defeated the Mau, with each of them fleeing into the human world. They haven't been heard of since they went into exile. Roygun had the chance to become ruler of the underworld, Issei said. But he turned the position down. He stated that it was time for a new generation to rise out of the ashes of the old. He smiled. I couldn't agree more. And so, Roygun's 4 generals took up the mantle of Mau, Ashiya continued. Becoming Serafol Leviathan, Ajuka Beelzebub, Falbium Asmodeus and Surzich's Lucifer. And those 4 continue to lead a new modern underworld to this day. Wow, so your brother is a pretty amazing person, isn't he? Chiho asked. Rias nodded. Yes, she said. But anyway, we've digressed from what I wanted to tell you. The crimson-haired girl looked at her seriously. Chiho, although we currently have a ceasefire between our factions, there are still skirmishes going on all the time. That fallen angel that attacked you is not the only one in the city. I need to train you to be capable of defending yourself. At least until one of us can get to you. So you want to teach me how to fight? The brown-haired girl asked nervously. Well, then this is pretty good timing, Akeno's voice called out as she re-entered the room. We've received a call from the Archduke. We've got a stray devil. A stray, huh? Ria's mused. This is good. Chiho. We're going on a hunt. I want you to watch us and get a feel for how we fight. Alright now, Chiho squeaked. Ria's nodded. Don't worry, I guarantee your safety, she reassured her. Issei-kun, would you mind accompanying us? I believe she will feel more secure with you there. If you wish, senpai, Issei shrugged. Their group stood and began to gather around Akeno. Let's go, Ria's ordered. What is a stray devil? Chiho asked nervously as they appeared before an old, decrepit building on the edge of town. They are servant devils who have betrayed their masters, Kiba explained. They break the laws set in place and leave on their own. That's why they are known as strays. This one is particularly wanted because she's been causing havoc in the human world, Akeno said. She's been luring humans to this building and eating them. Eating them? The brown-haired girl squeaked. Issei sighed. I assume she's wanted dead or alive. Indeed. Ria's nodded as they entered the building. Chiho, how much do you know about chess? It's like shogi, isn't it? Chiho asked. Yes, it's very similar, the redhead said. The way we fight is based off the game of chess. As master, Issei-kun and I are the king of our respective peerages. Additionally, there is the Quen, Knight, Bishop, Rook, and Pawn. As king, Issei-kun, and I can grant the attributes of these pieces to our servants. This technique is the very same method Ajuka invented, Issei explained. It is known as the evil piece system. Now, I want you to watch how we devils fight, Ria said. Suddenly Kaneko tensed while Tamamo frowned. She's here, the white-haired girl announced. The smell of blood is overwhelming, the fox complained, covering her nose. What's this? A voice called out. There's something foul here, but I also smell something delicious. Are you sweet or are you bitter? Out of the shadows, a nude woman's torso appeared before them. Her black hair fell to her chest, partially covering her breasts as her psychotic eyes stared them down. Stray devil, visor, Riaz announced. You have abandoned your master and let your powers run rampant. You will now face judgment. In the name of the House of Gremory, I will destroy you. Impudent little brat, aren't you? The woman sneered. Shall I dye you red, like that hair of yours? Taiho let out a whimper. Issei patted her on the head. Don't worry, he said. Oftentimes, their bark is worse than their bite. She looks pathetically weak, Mordred frowned. Tamamo nodded. Even I have to admit that, she agreed. You little pieces of shit. The woman raged. The rest of her enormous hideous body emerged from the shadows. A monster, Chiho squeaked as the woman began massaging her breasts. Issei's eyes narrowed. Ashia, he commanded. The white-haired man nodded. Suddenly, magic circles appeared around Visor's breasts and beams of energy burst forth only to be met with Ashia's barrier. They watched as the area around them began to melt as the energy touched it. She shoots acid from her tits. Mordred asked, her voice deadpan. Definitely a monster. Chiho exclaimed. Don't let your guard down, Riaz advised her. Now it's our turn. Yudo. Mordred, you're up. Issei nodded. The blonde girl let out a grin. Don't destroy her in one attack. We're teaching Chiho. The knight scowled. Fine, she grunted as a majestic sword appeared in her hands. The two blondes suddenly disappeared. What happened? The brown-haired girl asked. They disappeared. That's just pure speed, Riaz explained. Mordred-san and Yudo's position is Knight. The Knight's specialty is speed and melee weaponry. But their weakness is a low defense, Issei explained as Visor's arms were sliced off. The blondes reappeared, Kiba with a smile and Mordred with a disappointed frown. They can be overwhelmed by a powerful attack if they aren't careful. Kaneko. Riaz ordered. Mordred patted Morgiana on the shoulder as she passed by. Your turn, the smaller girl nodded and stepped up with Kaneko at her side. Visor charged at them, her monstrous body ripped open, revealing a set of huge jagged teeth. Watch out. Chiho cried out. Morgiana nodded at Kaneko before leaping aside as Visor enveloped the white-haired girl in her jaws. Kaneko-san. That's nothing, Riaz said offhandedly. It'll take more than that to harm Kaneko. Issei noticed movement out of the corner of his eye. He turned to see one of Visor's arms, which had been severed by Kiba and Mordred, crawling towards them. Suddenly, a hail of kunai rained from the shadows, impaling it and pinning it to the ground. He smirked to himself before turning back towards the fight. Apparently, Kaneko had forced the monster's jaw open and threw it high into the air. Morgiana crouched low and leapt after it, leaving a crater in the ground. With a grunt, the small redhead kicked the monster into a pillar, causing it to crumple beneath her weight. Kaneko is my ROK, Riaz explained. And I assume Morgiana-san is as well. Their power is simple, absolute strength and defense. Their greatest weakness is their low speed, Issei told her as the brown-haired girl gaped at the spectacle. But Morgiana-sen is the fastest ROOK I have ever seen, Ria said appreciatively. It was remarkable, really. Next would be the Bishop. Unfortunately, I don't have mine with me. Issei-kun, if you would. He nodded. Tamamo. The fox girl grinned, her ears and tail suddenly popping up. Sure thing, she stepped towards the monster, who was struggling to get up. Sorry, but I can't refuse my master. With a lazy snap of her fingers, Visor was enveloped in flames. The monster writhed in agony as the fire slowly grew in intensity. Ara, is it my turn yet? Akeno asked, placing a hand against her cheek. I'm getting jealous. In a moment, Riaz nodded before turning to Chiho. Tamamo-sen is Issei-kun's Bishop. The Bishop's strength lies in her magic. Since Tamamo-sen is a kitsune, her specialty is in fire magic. Akeno. Ara, what should I do, I wonder? The black-haired girl licked her lips. Akeno is my Quen, Riaz explained. And I believe Ashiya-sensei is Issei-kun's Quen. Ashiya twitched at his newly assigned title. The girls grinned at him. Oh, they would never let him live this down. Like in chess, the Quen possesses all the attributes of the other pieces, Issei said, smirking at Ashiya as well. This generally makes them the most powerful and balanced member of the peerage, bar the King. Riaz nodded as lightning began crackling around Akeno's fingertips. And Akeno is indeed my most powerful servant, she said. Damn you. Visor howled. Oh, you're still quite lively, aren't you? The sadistic girl questioned. She raised her hands. Then how about this? The monster howled in pain as the lightning struck. She is Quen, but magic is her specialty, Riaz said as Akeno began breathing heavily from Visor's screams of agony. And not only that, she is the ultimate sadist. Scary, Chiho muttered. Akeno, that's enough, Riaz commanded. The lightning subsided and Akeno turned around. Oh, what a pity, she said in disappointment as Riaz approached the downed stray. Do you have any last words? The Redite asked. Kill me? Very well, Riaz nodded. In that case checkmate. In a flash of red and black light, Visor's body was destroyed, her howls of agony echoing throughout the building. Amazing, Chiho uttered as the light subsided. Riaz sighed before turning around. It's over, she smiled. Why don't we head home? Actually, our place isn't too far from here, Issei offered. Why don't we head there? We'll treat you guys to dinner. His servants looked at him as though he were insane. Issei-sama, what are? Relax, Issei said, a grin on his face. I know what I'm doing. Very well, Issei-kun, the crimson-haired girl smiled. Lead the way. So this is your home? Riaz asked as she and her servants stared at their rundown apartment. Issei grinned as his servants looked away in embarrassment. Sorry if it's a bit small, he chuckled. Issei-sama. Ashiya hissed. How do you intend to feed this many people? Simple, Ashiya, the brown-haired boy grinned. Our missing member has finally arrived. The white-haired man's eyes widened. You mean, Yo, a voice called out from above. They glanced up to see a girl, balancing easily atop a telephone line. The girl had long black hair, tied into a ponytail that reached her shoulders and dark onyx-colored eyes. Ara, am I looking at a mirror? Akeno questioned with a confused smile. She was right. Now looking at her for the first time in over a month, Issei saw the girl was indeed very similar to Akeno. But whereas the sadistic girl carried a constant serene expression, the new girl's gaze was aloof, with her mouth forming a straight line. She wore a loose, high-collared white shirt that highly resembled a kimono top. Though he couldn't see it, he knew that there was a red and white Ichiwa fan emblazoned on the back. The shirt itself was open to her waist, revealing that her breasts had been tightly bound with white sarashi cloth and leaving the rest of her midriff exposed. Around her waist was a dark blue cloth that reached from halfway up her stomach to her knees. Over this she wore a dark purple rope as a sort of belt. For her legs she wore a pair of tight black shorts with a pair of black leg warmers that left the skin of her thighs visible and a pair of thin black sandals. The girl suddenly disappeared in a swirl of leaves and reappeared directly in front of Issei. Ungaping? She questioned, a smirk on her face. Not yet, give me a few moments, he replied easily. The girl rolled her eyes and looked like she about to say something, but was interrupted. Suzuki Issei. Tamamo cried, capturing the taller girl in an embrace, sobbing all over her shoulder. You're finally here. I'll never have to eat cucumbers again. Boy, stupid fox. The girl snapped, struggling against her. Get off. Issei began prying the fox girl off, smiling slightly. Everyone, this is Uchiha Suzuki, he introduced the girl. Hawarimi no Jutsu. She suddenly disappeared, a wooden log taking her place. Riaz and her peerage stared at the log in shock. Damn fox, Suzuki's voice grumbled as she stepped out of the shadows. She's a ninja, Issei nodded at their stunned appearance. A ninja? Riaz muttered. I've never heard her name before. Of course you haven't, the black-haired girl scowled. You think an assassin would go around spreading her name? She also happens to be filthy rich. Tamamo cheered. Nah, Suzuki-chan. Let's go eat. Finally, some real food, Mordred grumbled. Sorry to dump this on you, Suzuki, Issei said sheepishly. Do you mind? He began growing worried as she refused to look at him. Suzuki, are you okay? Yeah, that's no longer possible, she said after a while, still not looking at him. Huh? After the fox and I were separated, I got into a bit of legal trouble, the black-haired girl began. Issei paled. Legal trouble? He squeaked. How much did you? Everything, everything. He shouted. His servants had all gone pale as well. You lost everything. If anything, I'm in debt. She still refused to look at him. Debt. 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 Issei slowly sank to his knees. Well, I hope you're all okay with cucumbers and milk, Ashiya said as he began leading the way towards the apartment. This is all your fault. Mordred snapped at Tamamo. Harem, Margiana added. The fox girl simply collapsed to the ground, tears streaking her beautiful face. Why? She cried out her sorrow to the heavens above. Is it because I ditched her? The blonde girl growled at her, grabbing the hysterical fox by the collar and dragging her towards the apartment. Morgiana picked up their still motionless master and slung him over her shoulder, following after the blonde. Idadakamasu, everyone said unenthusiastically as Ashiya set their cucumbers on the table. Idadakamasu, Tamamo muttered, though she made no move to eat. Her head was slumped onto the table. Issei hadn't even moved since Azuki had informed them of their new financial status. Debt. Such a small word, yet it seemed so big. I wonder which body part sell for the most. He muttered. Perhaps I have a use for Chachizero after all. Now that you mention it, today has been remarkably pleasant, Ashiya remarked. Where is she anyway? Oh, her? Suzuki shrugged. She stood and opened one of the cupboards. Everyone stared in shock at the green-haired puppet that sat, tightly bound by metallic wires. She glared at them all venomously, but said nothing, as her mouth was taped shut with duct tape. Wow. Ah, that's right, Issei muttered. Suzuki is the only person that can control Chachizero. The black-haired girl raised an eyebrow as everyone bowed to her. We acknowledge this power. They said in eerie unison. In the cupboard, a still-bound Chachizero was thinking dark thoughts. All of them involving a certain black-haired ninja dying a horribly painful death. Here's a origin of Uchiha Suzuki. Uchiha Suzuki, Naruto. Suzuki was born as the illegitimate child of ninjas Uchiha Sasuke and Uzumaki Karen. The two were teammates as Sasuke traveled the country as a criminal along with two others. Karen was in love with Sasuke from the beginning and constantly sought to gain his affection. Sasuke did not feel the same way and chose to ignore her advances. Eventually, Karen, desperate for his attention, tricked Sasuke into getting drunk and slept with him. When Sasuke discovered this, he was enraged. He scorned the woman and left her, completely disregarding the possibility that she may be carrying his child. Heartbroken, Karen traveled alone and eventually gave birth to a baby girl. She raised the girl into childhood, but as the child's similarities with her father grew, she simply could not stand to be around her anymore. Karen left her child in a small village, alone and without a means to care for herself. She was eventually found by the man who would eventually call himself Gary-stu Issei. The girl had grown up as a thief in the slums of her town. He was impressed by her skill, but pitied the reasons for which she used those skills. He offered her a chance to live a different life. She was wary of him, but accepted regardless. He unknowingly took her to her father's village, where they trained her in the way of the shinobi. She was labeled a prodigy by her teachers. But everyone was shocked when the girl activated her Sharingan, or copy Wii. It was a genetic technique that allowed her to memorize anything she saw and copy any technique that she saw. It was a well-known technique of the Uchiha clan. The Hokage, the leader of the village, recognized the girl's appearance as belonging to an old friend of his and asked that a paternity test be performed. It was confirmed. Suzuki was the daughter of Uchiha Sasuke, who had passed away in the last war. And so she inherited the Uchiha's assets, which included scrolls for every technique they'd accumulated in their library and a large fortune. She continued to hone her skills and became renowned throughout their underground world as one of the most powerful and talented shinobi of her generation. But eventually, it came time for Issei to move on. Unwilling to part with the person who had completely changed her life, Suzuki demanded to go with him. He warned her that following him would be dangerous. She knew that her village would label her a criminal and hunt her down, but she didn't care. She secretly left the village with him, the entirety of the Uchiha fortune hidden away for her to retrieve later. And so she continued to follow him. The person who had given her a life. And a family. Chapter 9. Issei sighed as he sat by himself in the local park. This morning, Suzuki informed them that she had to go speak with a lawyer. Understandably, no one was in the mood to go to school at this point. Only Ashiya had gone, seeing as he still had work. Morgiana had likewise gone to work at another construction site. They had a debt to pay off, after all. He sighed again. The mama was still at home sulking, and Mordred was off wreaking havoc with her gang, leaving Issei alone in his despair. "Dad," he cried miserably, his face in his hands as he sobbed, drawing strange stares from several people passing by. "Mommy? Don't look, sweetie," the mother hushed as Issei howled once more. The brown-haired boy sniffed as he heard someone squeak, followed by a loud thud. What he saw immediately snapped him out of his funk. It was a blonde girl with bright green eyes. A suitcase filled with her belongings lay at her side, its contents spilling out all over the sidewalk. Apparently she had tripped over herself, giving him a generous view of her white panties. But that's not what caught his attention. She was a nun. So this is the nun from Europe. Issei thought, watching the girl as she slowly sat up. With a small sigh he walked over. Oh, the girl croaked. "How did I manage to trip over my own 2 feet? Are you okay, sister?" he asked, offering his hand. The blonde nun took it gratefully and he lifted her up. "Oh, you speak Italian?" she asked in surprise. Issei nodded. "I assumed you knew at least a bit of Italian," he replied easily. "Being a part of the clergy and all." She looked relieved. "Oh, thank the Lord," she said with a smile. Her eyes were filled with an almost childlike innocence. "I've been so lost ever since I arrived in this country. I'm afraid I can't speak Japanese very well. It must have been his will that we met today." "Perhaps," he said neutrally. "Are you on your way to the church?" The blonde girl nodded. "Yes, but as you can see, I haven't had much luck," she smiled at him sheepishly. "I could take you if you want," Issei offered. The girl beamed at him. "Could you really?" she asked eagerly. "That would wonderful." Issei nodded. "Alright," he paused. "By the way, I never got your name." "I'm Highschooldxd Issei." The blonde girl blushed. "Oh, I'm so sorry," she exclaimed. "I'm Asia Argento." The brown-haired boy smiled. "Nice to meet you, Asia. Please take care of me, Issei-san." Asia bowed as he picked up her suitcase and slung it over his shoulder. "Well, let's go." Uma slowly entered the church. It had been several days since Issei killed the sacred gear girl and suddenly disappeared. They'd been suspicious until Azazel-sama sent a message that he'd assigned the man to a different area. But still, now they were one person down. And in an area infested by devils, having Issei gone put them at a disadvantage. Hopefully that excommunicated nun would arrive here soon. They needed her power more than ever. She remembered the day they'd been informed of their mission. They'd been told that they would be testing a new ritual that would allow them to transfer a sacred gear from a human to one of their own. While it was unfortunate that they had to sacrifice the human, they'd been told it would be for the greater good of their faction and that the one to successfully perform the ritual would be lauded as a hero by Azazel-sama. She'd immediately volunteered to be the one to administer the ritual. She'd been infatuated by their leader since the day she fell. Her comrades teased her about it endlessly, but she didn't care. This was finally her chance to prove herself to Azazel-sama. But as she sat at one of the pews, she felt her drive muted. Sure, she would still be lauded as a hero of her faction, but she found herself caring less about the attention she would receive. "It's because of him," she muttered to herself. It was because of Highschooldxd Issei. That charming, albeit somewhat dorky, boy who had inexplicably wormed his way into her heart. Of course Kalwerner and Middle had shown no mercy in teasing her about him. She hadn't had a chance to see him since their last date, which she was both relieved and disappointed about. She'd used the past few days to sort out her feelings. Uma accepted that yes, she did indeed care for him. She didn't quite love him yet, but it was getting there, quickly. Thinking about his dorky grin made her face flush and her thoughts began to drift. The way his eyes lit up whenever he was amused. The way his hair flowed in the wind, the way his muscles rippled as he maneuvered his bike, her hands trailing up his perfectly toned chest. She unconsciously licked her lips. "Hey, look who just came," a voice remarked. "I swear I didn't." The black-haired angel squeaked, her thoughts running wild. Kalwerner raised an eyebrow and smirked. "Oh, thinking of your new beau? Stuff it." Uma snapped as she tried to compose herself. "As if I would be thinking of someone like him." She may have accepted her feelings in her heart, but she was still vehemently denying it to anyone who asked. Middle let out a giggle. "Oh. That's too bad." She turned towards the entryway. "You hear that, Haidu-san? Looks like Uma-chan here doesn't like you anymore. Maybe you should ask me out instead." The black-haired angel's eyes widened as she spun around. He was indeed standing there, smirking slightly as he stood next to a blonde-haired girl. "Ice-kun," she exclaimed, her face going red. "What are you doing here?" "I was just escorting Asia-san here," the brown-haired boy said, putting on a hurt expression while ignoring the uncomfortable sensation the church gave off. "I'm hurt, Uma-chan. I really thought we had something together." He heaved a sigh and turned to walk away. "But if you really feel that way." "No, wait." Uma squeaked, rushing towards him. She ignored Kalwerner and Middle, who both guffawed at her reaction. I didn't mean that, Issei chuckled, patting her on the head. I was kidding, Yuma, he said with a grin. Lighten up. The girl scowled at him. You shouldn't toy with a girl's feelings, Ice-kun. Meanwhile, Middlet was finally regaining her breath. Oh, wow. She giggled. I can't believe you actually fell for that. You were blustering about like a schoolgirl. Issei raised an eyebrow. Oh, but isn't she a schoolgirl? The blonde paled as Yuma sent her a venomous glare for her slip-up. Oh, of course, she squeaked. It was just an expression. Anyway, I middled. Yuma-chan has told us a lot about you. This is Kalwerner. We're from abroad. The older woman merely nodded at him in acknowledgement. I'm Highschooldxd Issei, the boy nodded. But I'm afraid I know nothing of you two. Aw, but I thought we were friends, Yuma-chan, Kalwerner smirked. The glare of the black-haired girl sent her clearly said shut up. Anyway, Ice-kun, Yuma said, drawing his attention away from the others. Thank you for bringing Asia here. So, you work here, Yuma? He asked casually. The girl hesitated before nodding. Yes, I live here, actually, she explained. She paused. Ice-kun. Are you free today? The brown-haired boy froze. He muttered. He really hoped she didn't want to go on another date. I actually agreed to show Asia-san around town today. The black-haired girl paused. I see, she said, glancing at the shy blonde at his side. Would you mind if I went with you? And not at all. The nun squeaked. She bowed to her. Just let me set my things down and we can go. Issei nodded as the blonde girl quickly followed after Kalwerner, who volunteered to show her to her room. I should have known something like this would happen, he silently cried to himself, knowing that his wallet would be significantly lighter after today. Ice-kun, Yuma began as the group of three sat in a booth at McDonald's. Asia had stated that she'd never had a hamburger before and Issei had offered to take them there. The manager didn't question his sudden appearance, merely eyeing the two girls and grinning at him, waggling his eyebrow suggestively. Yes, Yuma, he asked with a smile. Thank goodness I get free food here. I'm such a genius. He mentally gave himself a pat on the back, along with blowhorns and streamers. So caught up in his internal celebration, he nearly missed the girl's question. Shouldn't you be in school right now? Asia gasped. Issei-san, are you ditching? She asked in horror. The brown-haired boy started slightly before compassing himself. Shouldn't you be as well, Yuma? He asked, smirking as the fallen angel flinched. She uttered, fidgeting awkwardly. I won't tell if you won't. That's no good. Asia cried out, startling both of them. You should attend school. She suddenly had a sad gleam in her eye. I grew up in the church and was kept isolated from kids my age since I was young. The blonde girl looked up at them with her wide, innocent eyes. You should enjoy yourself at school. Promise me you will. Issei looked at her in surprise, and even Yuma looked shocked at her sudden intensity. You've never really known anything outside the church, have you? He asked sympathetically. The black-haired girl beside him remained silent. The blonde nun shook her head. No, I haven't, she admitted. She smiled at him. I've never had friends my own age. That's why I was so happy when you offered to show me around, Issei-san. All the things I've seen since coming here have been so amazing. Thank you, Issei-san. I can only wonder if this is what it would have been like to have friends. What do you mean wonder? Issei smiled at her. We are friends. He nudged Yuma. Right, Yuma-chan. The black-haired girl looked at him, startled. Right, she muttered quietly, not looking at them. Asia looked stunned. Why you mean it? She asked, tears welling in her eyes. Yuma noticeably flinched as she spotted the tears. Issei nodded, a new determination in his eyes. Yeah, he smiled. Come on. We'll show you how normal people have fun with friends. The blonde nun wiped her eyes and smiled at them brilliantly. Issei couldn't help but smile back. And unknown to him, a small smile had found its way on Yuma's face as well. Thank you so much for today, Issei-san. Asia bowed to him as they stood outside the church. He and Yuma had taken her all over town. She really was incredibly innocent, oohing and ahing at the most mundane of things. Issei had to admit he'd grown fond of her in the short time since they'd met. Though she was reluctant to spend time with the blonde at first, he could tell Yuma had taken a shine to her as well. By the end of the day, the black-haired girl had taken to dragging the blonde girl by the hand and calling her Asia-chan. Now that they were back at the church, however, Yuma seemed hesitant once again. It was no problem, Asia, he smiled at her. We'll hang out again soon, I promise. The blonde girl smiled her radiant smile and ducked inside the church. Hey, Yuma, he began, snapping the black-haired girl out of her thoughts. She's really sweet, don't you think? Why yeah, I guess, she muttered. Take care of her, Issei requested. Yuma looked at him in alarm. She needs a friend, he explained. Issei glanced back at Asia, who was eagerly telling a surprised Middlet about her day. Did you see how happy she was today? All from doing things that other people take for granted every day. Ice-kun? He looked at her seriously. She must have lived an incredibly isolated life, he said. I want to preserve that smile. You understand too, don't you? I saw the way you looked at her today. I asked that you take care of her and be her friend. But she trailed off as he took her hand. Please, he said, staring into her eyes. If not for her, then for me. Why does he do this to me? The girl mentally cried as her face flushed. Alright, Issei smiled at her. Thank you, he smirked and kissed her on the cheek. He pulled away to see her face had gone completely red. What do you say? Next time we go out, it'll be just the two of us. He glanced at his watch. I gotta go. I'll see you soon. She watched him go until he disappeared over the hill. You shouldn't make promises you can't keep, Kalwerner said from behind her. Yuma turned to see the older woman leaning against a doorframe. The black-haired girl glared at her. Where's Asia? In her room, Yuma didn't say anything as she brushed past her. You're too young, Ray, she said softly with a small sigh. You can't keep getting attached. You'll only end up getting hurt. The black-haired girl didn't respond and rounded the corner towards the living quarters, Kalwerner staring after her. I'm worried about you, Ray. I'm home, Issei called out as he took off his shoes. He heard the sounds of an argument and debated leaving for a moment before finally stepping inside. His servants were all gathered around the katatsu with a smartly dressed man with black hair. Wait a moment, that wasn't the katatsu. What's going on here? He asked, causing the room to go silent. And who is this? The man stood and bowed to him. Hello, you must be Haidu Issei-san, he began. I am Uchiha-san's attorney. My name is Wright, Phoenix Wright. Nice to meet you, Wright-san. Just call me Phoenix, the man offered. Issei nodded. Very well, Phoenix, he said, still staring at the Nakatatsu. And what happened to our table? The lawyer flinched. Actually, a repo man came by and repossessed it. Our table has been repossessed. Issei sputtered. And just what the hell is that? I had a feeling something like this would happen, Issei-sama, Ashia nodded sagely. So I managed to secure us a cardboard box as a replacement. A cardboard box? Issei repeated, still trying to get over the fact that their table had been repossessed and they were currently sitting around a cardboard box. Indeed, Ashia said. High quality, too. He even patted it for emphasis. It collapsed. Issei slowly sank to the floor. They watched as he curled up in a fetal position, muttering incoherently. Though they managed to pick out words like organs and homicide. Tachizera might have commented. If she wasn't still stuck in the cupboard, bound and gagged. Chapter 10. Issei almost had to physically restrain himself from strangling the man sitting across from him. Honestly, how could a single person ever be so bullheaded? And I'm telling you, the brown-haired boy growled. That Dragon Ball can never hope to compare to the sheer masterpiece that is Neon Genesis Evangelion. Oh, please, their client, Morisawa scoffed as Chiho shuffled awkwardly in between them. Just look at the main character. How could anyone like an anime where the main character is a little wimp? And how could anyone possibly enjoy a main character that is completely overpowered? Issei demanded. He could vaguely feel a sense of irony here somewhere, but he ignored it. Earlier this evening, Riaz had asked Chiho to go forge her first contract. The brown-haired girl had been understandably nervous and asked if Issei could accompany her. Riaz had agreed and now here he was arguing with some Itaku Hikikomori over which anime was better. He'd originally asked Chiho to cosplay for him, but the girl was simply too embarrassed to do so Issei distracted him by commenting on his anime collection. That turned out to be a mistake. The two devils had arrived here in the afternoon and their argument had gone well into the evening. Honestly, he had way too much to deal with right now with their dead and the fallen angels. At least Phoenix had promised to help them get their money back. Or at the very least get their katatsu returned to them. But now he had to deal with this shit. Alright, we'll settle this once and for all. Issei shouted. Morisawa nodded at him and the two turned to Chiho, who let out a small heap. Chiho-san. The older man exclaimed. Which do you think is better, eh? The brown-haired girl squeaked. Well, I actually like Sailor Moon more than either of them. Oh, you did not just go there. So you didn't get a contract? Riaz asked, raising an eyebrow. The two devils bowed to her in embarrassment. Sorry, Issei apologized. It was my fault. Well, it does say here that he had a lot of fun with you, Issei-kun, the crimson-haired beauty remarked as she read Morisawa's review. He says he'd like to meet up with you again. Is that so? Issei chuckled sheepishly as Chiho looked even more dejected than before. Sorry, Kai-chan. Well, Chiho, would you like to try again? Riaz offered. We have another request if you're interested. The brown-haired girl nodded. Yes, but you, she exclaimed, a determined look in her eye. I'll even go by myself this time. You sure, Chiho? Issei asked. She nodded once again. Alright, I'll prepare a circle for you to use. Alright, Chiho, Riaz nodded. Do your best to get a contract this time. Yes, but you? They watched as the girl stepped into the circle and disappeared. The crimson-haired beauty turned to him. So, what's this I hear about repossession? she asked, amusement dancing in her eyes. I'm so sorry. The brown-haired girl bowed. So you still didn't get a contract? Chai-ho flushed in embarrassment. He wanted me to turn him into a magical girl, she admitted. I couldn't do that, so I ended up having to watch Magical Girl and I'm with him instead. I'm beginning to think you're a magnet for strange people, Kai-chan. Issei said from the corner where he was still sulking from Ria's earlier comment. But I don't want to attract strange people. The girl cried. She began muttering to herself. I want to attract Issei-san. Did you say something? Nothing. Ria sighed, rubbing the bridge of her nose. Well, we've got one more contract for today, she said after a while. Do you want to give it one last shot? Why yes. The girl exclaimed. I promise I'll get a contract this time. Please do, Ria's nodded. Issei stood and summoned a transportation circle. Good luck, Chai-ho, he smiled as she disappeared. Tai-ho appeared before her destination in a flash of light. Strange, she thought to herself. Last time I appeared directly inside the house. Oh, well, she muttered, clenching her fist. I'll definitely get a contract this time. The brown-haired girl took determined strides as she approached the client's place of residence. Hello? She called out at the door. There was no answer. Tai-ho twisted the doorknob. It's open. She questioned. Hello? I'm a devil sent by the Gremory. I'm here to. She froze as a cold chill rode up her spine. Her skin began to prickle, as though the temperature had just dropped considerably. What was that? The girl whispered. She looked into the dark hallway. There was a faint light in the living room, likely from candles. Hello? There was once again no answer. She was tempted to just leave, but the image of Ria's disappointed face kept her from doing so. I won't let her down, she whispered. And I won't let Issei-san down either. She took off her shoes and stepped inside. I'm coming in. Stepping into the candlelit living room, she glanced about. Hello, where are? She let out a squeak as she felt her footstep in something warm and wet. What is this? She rubbed the liquid off her foot. It was red. It was then that the heavy, metallic scent of blood washed over her, nearly causing her to vomit. Chai-ho looked up to see her client crucified to the wall. Sinners must be punished. A male voice called out from her left. She spun around to see a white-haired man with red eyes sitting on the couch. The man sent her a psychotic grin. Well, like my handiwork. Why you did this? She gasped. He giggled. Well, if it isn't a little devil girl. The priest exclaimed. Wow, what a treat. He performed an exaggerated bow. My name is Fried Selzen. I'm a holy priest performing exorcisms for mankind. Why you're a priest? Chai-ho stuttered fearfully. He smirked at her cruelly. Well, I'm certainly not a shitty little devil like you, he cackled. Why did you hurt him? The girl demanded, backing away as he took a step towards her. He didn't do anything. He tried to summon a devil, Fried said offhandedly. And since you're here, I'd say he succeeded. That's more than enough cause to kill him. He looked at her with his insane eyes. To destroy a shitty devil's face in the shittiest of ways, he drew a sword in his right hand and a pistol in his left. Is my job, bud. Tai-ho shuddered as his eyes roamed over her body. You're a cute one, aren't you? He asked lustfully. I think I'll have a little fun with you before I kill you. And no, she whispered as he approached her. Fried leapt at her, causing her to shriek as she jumped away. She landed on all fours and began crawling away from him. Oh, yes. The man shouted, panting like a dog. I love it when they scream. Someone help me, please. Chai-ho choked, feeling tears beginning fall from her eyes as the man towered over her. She suddenly felt a large presence in her mind. Do you want power? Issei glanced at the clock on the wall. They should be returning soon, Ria said, noticing his glance. Just as she finished speaking, a transport circle appeared on the ground, a small figure taking shape. Welcome back, Kaneko-san, Issei greeted. The white-haired girl nodded at him. What did you have to do this time? Played video games, she answered as Kiba appeared behind her. Got a limited edition manga for my trouble. And Mika-san had me cook for her once again, the blonde told them as he handed Riaz a small wad of cash. She gave us this in exchange. Ara, Akeno said as she appeared in a flash of red light. I'm the last to arrive. I must be losing my touch. Looking at her rather erotic outfit, Issei felt he'd rather not know what she'd been doing. Opening his mouth to comment, he was interrupted as a bright blue circle flashed into existence. Tamamo? He asked, noticing her wide-eyed appearance. I thought you were at work. Master, where's Chai-ho-chan? The fox demanded, still in her cosplay outfit and hinting at the urgency of her presence. She went on a job, why? Riaz asked curiously. Wait, I thought you still had tracking charms on her? Issei asked in confusion. His eyes widened. But if you can't sense her, that means. There's a barrier wherever she just went, Tamamo said gravely. She may have fallen into a trap set by the fallen angels. Ah damn it. He cursed, leaping to his feet. Riaz likewise stood with a look of fury on her face. Akeno. She barked. The black-haired girl nodded, her face serious. Yes, but you, the group gathered around her as she prepared a transportation circle. Issei glanced at Ria's face. It was twisted in a mixture of rage and terror. Please be alright, Chiho. Do you want the power to defend yourself? The voice asked again. Are you going to die here and be violated by this man? No, please help me. Chiho cried. Fried laughed at her. No one's coming. He cackled, placing his sword at her throat. She hissed in pain as it burned her. If you want to survive, you must stand and fight. The voice told her. But I can't fight. The white-haired man looked down at her in confusion. What the hell are you talking about? He demanded. Just then, someone came through the door. Father Fried. A blonde girl cried out in horror. What are you doing? The man twitched at the interruption. What does it look like I'm doing, Asia? He rolled his eyes. I'm killing this shitty devil here, just like that sinner over there. Asia looked where he was pointing and gasped, covering her mouth in mute horror. Why? Fried let out an aggravated sigh. That man contracted with a devil, he explained impatiently. It's our duty to judge him for his sins. And this is the devil he summoned. It's our job to kill her too. But she hasn't done anything to us. The blonde nun cried. She's an innocent person. Please, just let her go. Taiho's eyes widened. This nun wanted to spare her. She felt hope blossoming in her chest. Are you serious right now? The white-haired priest demanded. Look, she's not a person, she's a devil. We kill devils. Understand? The blonde girl shook her head fiercely. No. She repeated. Please, don't. Fried glared at her. Oh, so you're turning traitor now? He growled. Then perhaps I should kill you as well as this shitty devil. He lunged at the blonde, pinning her to the wall by the throat. His eyes trailed down her body. But that'd be such a waste. You have a very fine body, Asia-chan. What? No. Asia squeaked, struggling against him as he began tearing her clothes off. Girl, this is your chance. The voice shouted in her mind. It's now or never. Stand and fight. Taiho scrambled to her feet. Her eyes dilated with fear as she watched Fried tear off the nun's clothing. I won't die here. She whispered to herself. I can't die here. Oh? Fried turned towards her. Finally ready to fight back, you shitty devil. I won't die here. Suddenly the room was enveloped in a blinding green light coming from Chiho's left arm. What the fuck? The white-haired man exclaimed, covering his eyes. What is this? Chiho whispered in awe as she stared at the bright red gauntlet now covering her arm. I feel stronger. So you're a sacred gear user, Fried shouted, turning his sword on her. He lunged at her, and Chiho brought her arm up in fear. Boost. Clang. What? The priest exclaimed in surprise as he leapt back. So it's not demon-based. I can do this, the brown-haired girl whispered. Boost. I can do this. She leapt at Fried, her fist raised. Too slow, the man easily sidestepped her attack, slicing her lower back with his sword. Chiho cried out in agony as the sword burned her. Well, that was anticlimactic. He sighed slightly. Well, I'm bored now. I'll just kill you and go play Mario Kart at the arcade. No, don't. Asia cried, covering her bare chest with her hands. Fried twitched. Okay, seriously, this is getting a little old. He snarled. I agree, a voice called out as a bright red light enveloped the room. They turned to see the occult research club appearing behind them. Riaz glared at him darkly. It's time to end this game. But you? Chiho cried out, relief in her voice. Issei looked at her crumpled form and growled. Asia? Fried snarled. You were supposed to erect a barrier. Asia? Issei-san. The nun cried out in shock. The white-haired priest hummed. Do you know each other, Asia-chan? He grinned. I knew it. So you are a traitor. He raised his sword and licked Chiho's blood off. Oh, so many shitty little devils for me to play with. But you, the fallen angels are approaching, Kaneko announced. Riaz nodded. Our priority is getting Chiho away from here, she ordered. Akeno, prepare for transport. Yudo, keep him busy. Kaneko, grab her. Roger. Kiba rushed the priest, who leapt back. Kaneko took the chance to grab her fallen comrade and rush her towards Akeno. I'm so sorry, Kai-chan, Issei whispered to the girl, squeezing her hand. She smiled at him. It's not your fault, the brown-haired girl said. He squeezed her hand once more before turning towards the blonde girl. Issei-san, what are you doing here? Asia asked, still covering her chest as the boy approached. Issei's eyes narrowed. Did he hurt you too, Asia? He asked. The blonde nun blushed slightly. And no, but he tried to. She didn't need to finish her sentence. He immediately understood what she meant. Tamamo, he growled. Erect a barrier around this place. Of course, master, the fox bowed and raised her hands upward, a blue magic circle appearing on the ceiling. Issei-kun? Riaz questioned. Go, he ordered. Get Chiho away from here. Issei-san. Chiho shouted. He smiled at her. Go rest up, Issei ordered. I'll see you soon. Riaz nodded and she disappeared with her peerage in a flash of red light. Issei-san, Asia said quietly. Why, you're a devil. He smiled at her sadly. Yes, I am, he nodded, kneeling next to her. But knowing that, does it really change anything? We were friends before and we're still friends now. Her eyes widened. Are really? She asked shyly. He smiled. Always, he said. My, isn't this touching? Fried interrupted. It's so beautiful it makes me wanna puke. Issei sighed. Sorry about this, Asia, he whispered, waving a hand over her face. Make sure to tell Yuma what he did to you. Now, sleep. The blonde's eyes slowly fluttered shut as his spell took hold. He caught her before she fell and gently placed her on the couch. Boy, you ready to die now, shitty devil? The priest asked, licking his sword once again. I'll kill you, then rape your sexy fox girlfriend over there before I rape little Asia here. Issei slowly stood, his entire demeanor changing in an instant. The candles around the room began going out as his very presence seemed to eradicate the light around him. Boy, what the? Fried muttered as his light sword extinguished itself. He frantically shook the hilt. Light up, damn you. You have overstepped your bounds, a demonic voice growled. The priest glanced up in fear at the approaching figure. He raised his pistol and fired until the clip was empty, but he might as well have been throwing pebbles for all the good it did. Go on, stray priest. Pray for salvation. Oh, God, he whispered. His entire body shook as the thing took another step towards him. Demonic eyes stared him down as the priest slowly sank to his knees. And staring into those eyes, he knew the true meaning of terror. Taiho groaned slightly as she woke with the sun shining in her face. She pulled the sheets over her head and buried her face into her pillow. Funny, since when did her pillow get so soft and smooth? Was that the smell of roses? She rubbed her face into it. Ah. The pillow gasped. Taiho froze. Slowly, almost dreading to face the truth, she rose from the bed. Ara, good morning, Taiho, Riaz greeted with a smile. But you? The brown-haired girl squeaked. Why are we naked? Oh, no, my purity. I'm so sorry, Issei-san. Iridid giggled at her. Oh, relax, Taiho, she patted her on the head. You passed out when we got back, most likely from the strain of awakening and using your sacred gear. I had to heal you by pressing my body against yours. I assure you that you're still pure. Oh, Taiho sighed in relief. Then last night's events came rushing back into her. What happened to Issei-san? He came to check up on you, Riaz explained as she began getting dressed. He went home when I told him you'd be fine. You slept the entire day and we ended up missing school. Oh, she wasn't sure whether to feel happy that he came to see her or disappointed that he left. She glanced out the window. It was early evening. Do you know what happened when he stayed behind? Her master paused in her dressing. No, she said after a while. His expression when he returned though it was terrifying. Tamamo-san seemed unusually solemn as well. Taiho looked ready to speak once more but was interrupted by someone entering the room. Kai-chan, it's time for dinner. An older woman who resembled the brown-haired girl exclaimed. Riaz-chan, you're here again? The crimson-haired devil smiled at her. Yes, I'm sorry for intruding, Sasaki-san. It's no trouble at all, the woman waved her off. She turned her head. Otu-san. Set the table for 4. Riaz-chan is here again. Got it? A male voice called back. The woman turned back to them. When you're ready, come join us for dinner. With that she left, closing the door behind her. Riaz, now fully dressed, turned to her servant. We'll continue our conversation at the clubroom later. Taiho nodded and began dressing as well. Asia slowly opened her eyes as the sunlight streamed through the curtains of her room. Huh? She muttered as she sat up. Where am I? Asia? A voice caught her attention. She turned to see Yuma sitting at her bedside. Yuma-san? Are you okay? There was a demonic barrier around the house and we couldn't penetrate it. When we finally got in we found you half naked. Did those devils touch you? I swear, No. Asia shook her head. They didn't touch me. It was Father Fried that tried to. He what? The fallen angel demanded. I knew I should have killed him myself. What happened to him? The nun asked. Yuma flinched. I don't know what they did to him, she said. That was a lie. Kalwerner had examined the priest. Whoever did that to him had shown no mercy. They had broken him in every way imaginable while taking care to keep him coherent throughout the entire thing. The older woman told them that the curse magic that had been placed on the priest was so powerful that even their greatest healers couldn't hope to remove it and that even Asia's sacred gear would most likely prove useless. The man was left trapped within his own mind, all the while mentally experiencing the torture over and over again. Like a broken record. And if that wasn't enough, he'd had another curse placed upon him that would keep him just sane enough to comprehend what was happening to him. It truly would have been kinder to have just killed him. There was nothing they could do for him, so they'd dropped him off at the local hospital without a word. He'd be staying there until the day his body stopped functioning, a broken husk of a person. I see, the blonde girl whispered. Yuma-san, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to hurt people. Yuma sighed. Look, Asia, she began. Please understand, the devils are our enemies. We have to fight them or they'll kill us the first chance they get. But why? Asia cried. Why are they our enemies? Why can't we just stop fighting? I don't know, Asia, the black-haired girl sighed. But that's just the way things are. The devils have always been our enemies and they probably always will be. That's not true. The blonde girl shouted. It can't be true. Asia suddenly shot out of bed and ran out the door. Asia. Yuma ran after her, but the blonde had already disappeared. Ray, a voice called out. She turned to see Kalawiner watching her. He's getting impatient. She said softly. We have to do it tonight. The black-haired girl's eyes widened. Why you mean? Kalawiner sighed. Ray, she began. I warned you not to get attached. We have to do this. There are orders. Yuma whispered. The older woman sighed once again before placing a hand on her shoulder. I knew this would happen, she said. You don't have to do this. I'll perform the ritual in your place. The younger girl shook her head. I need to find Asia. She shook off the hand off her shoulder and took off in the direction Asia had gone. Kalawiner watched her go with worried eyes. Issei sighed as he walked. He'd decided this morning that he'd go check on Asia at the church after school before meeting up with the others at the clubroom. He was just making his way through the park when he suddenly spotted the blonde nun running. Asia? He called out. The girl froze and looked in his direction. Issei-san. She cried out, rushing over and hugging him. Asia, are you okay? He asked, noticing her tears. She sniffed, wiping the tears before nodding. Yes, she said quietly. I just had a fight with Yuma-san. That's all. I see, he muttered, patting her on the head. And what did you fight about? She said that I had to keep hurting people, Asia cried. She said that we would always be enemies with devils, but I don't understand why we have to be enemies. Issei sighed. Devils and fallen angels have been enemies since the beginning, Asia, he said solemnly. I don't like the fact any more than you do, but that's how it is. There's just too much hatred between them. But why? The nun asked tearfully. You're a devil and I'm a nun. We don't hate each other. Why can't everyone else be the same? He chuckled slightly. You're so innocent, Asia, he smiled. I love that about you. I hope it never changes. He leaned forward and kissed her on the forehead. Issei's eyes widened as he felt a sudden surge of energy. He barely had time to react when a spear of light impaled the ground next to them and exploded. Yuma rushed through the park. She was certain Asia had gone this way. The blonde girl had explained that she'd met Issei in there and would most likely return there in her distraught state. She finally spotted the girl's trademark golden hair. She cut herself off, ducking behind a tree. The girl was with Issei. Poking her head around the tree, she saw them embracing each other. She couldn't help the feelings of jealousy that rose up. She saw their lips moving but couldn't make out what they were saying. Carefully concealing her aura, lest she alert Asia to her presence, she crept towards them. But why? She heard Asia cry. You're a devil and I'm a nun. Her heart stopped. Did she just hear that correctly? Issei was a devil. That couldn't be true. How long had they been going out now? And how long has Asia known? Had everything been a lie? He told her, the thought came to her suddenly. He told her and didn't tell me. How long had this been going on? He was awfully protective of her. Was she in on it? How long had he been leading her on? How long had they both been leading her on? Ugly feelings began to emerge, but the more she tried to quash them, the more powerful they seemed to become. Why her? She mentally screamed. Was he just using me to get close to her? It was awfully convenient that he'd been the one to bring her to the church. He'd even agreed to show her around town. He seemed so upset when I asked to tag along. She clutched at her chest as a tidal wave of emotions washed over her. It hurts, she whispered as she braced herself against the tree she was hiding behind. Why? She looked up at the couple. I love that about you, Asia, the brown-haired boy smiled. I hope it never changes. He leaned down and kissed the blonde on the forehead. Something in her snapped. Issei glanced up through the dust and debris. He'd barely managed to get Asia away from ground zero. What he saw nearly made his jaw drop. Yuma, he breathed. There she was, wings spread to their full extent as she stared down at him coldly. Hello, Issei, she said emotionlessly. I'm surprised a filthy devil like you was able to dodge my attack. Yuma, my name isn't Yuma, she hissed. Do you want to know why I chose that name when I introduced myself? It was because it means evening haze in Japanese. I'd planned to kill you at sunset on the day of our date, an action I regret not taking. Yuma, just calm down, please, Issei pleaded. She glared at him hatefully. I'm tired of listening to your lies, she growled, a spear of light appearing in her hands. Asia, you'll return to the church with me. We perform the ritual tonight. Yuma-san, please. Asia cried. My name is Rainer. The fallen angel shouted, hurling her spear at the brown-haired devil. Issei leapt to the side, causing it to sail into a nearby tree and blowing it up. "Uma," he shouted once more. She created another spear. "You're not thinking clearly. Just calm down and I'll explain. How long has this been going on?" she shrieked, hurling the spear at him. "How long have you been leading me on?" "What?" he asked dumbfounded. That turned out to be the wrong thing to say, as she let out another scream of rage and created 5 more spears, throwing them in quick succession. He hastily erected a barrier. "Wait, damn it, listen to me. Stop, please, stop." Asia shouted. "I'll go with you, please, don't hurt him." "Asia?" Issei protested. She smiled at him tearfully. "Please stop fighting," she whispered. "I don't like seeing my friends fight each other." "But girl, Asia," Rainer said, floating down to her. She turned her cold stare on Issei. "This isn't over. I'll be back to finish the job." Issei watched as she placed a hand on the blonde girl's shoulder and disappeared in a flash of light. He stared up at the sky, frustration evident on his face. "Damn it." Tai-ho, Rias began as the occult research club gathered in their clubroom. The only ones missing were Issei and Suzuki. "I'd like to apologize for last night's fiasco. I sent you straight into the hands of an exorcist and nearly got you killed." The brown-haired girl flushed slightly. "It wasn't your fault, but she said. There was no way you could have known." "Still," the Retid sighed. "We were lucky you managed to awaken your sacred gear. You might have died had you not defended yourself." Tai-ho turned red in embarrassment. "Actually, I was defeated rather easily despite that," she admitted. "The only reason I'm still alive was because that nun didn't want to kill me." Rias raised an eyebrow. "A nun saved you?" she asked incredulously. The rest of her peerage looked equally dubious. "Yes, I was too weak to defend myself," Chiho said, somewhat bitterly. "I'm just a PAWN, after all." Now, Tamamo chided her. "Just because you're a PAWN doesn't automatically make you weak." "She is correct," Ashia nodded. "In the endgame, the piece that decides the match is oftentimes the PAWN. Do you know what happens when a PAWN reaches the end of the board? She can become a QUEEN, Riaz smiled. Or a KNIGHTBISHOPROOK. That's the special ability of the PAWN, promotion. When in enemy territory or with the permission of the KING, you can promote yourself to any other piece besides the KING. Or to put it metaphorically, a voice called out. With hard work and determination, you can go from being the weakest to the strongest." "Who's there?" Riaz barked, looking around the room. Out of the shadows, a familiar figure stepped forward. "Ara? You're Suzuki-san, aren't you?" Akeno asked. The other black-haired girl simply nodded. "How long were you there?" Kiba asked in shock. She smirked at him. "I was here the entire time." Riaz turned to the small white-haired girl sitting next to Kiba. "Hineko?" Hinekomata shook her head. "I couldn't sense her at all, she looked tense." "I see, so she's like Tamamo-san." "Not exactly," Ashia shook his head. "While Tamamo can disguise her presence into anything she wishes, Suzuki can erase her presence completely." "I told you," the black-haired Kunoichi said. "I'm an assassin. I specialize in getting in and getting out without being detected. The fox is more suited towards information gathering." She strode over to them and deposited a familiar doll onto the table. "Chachizero? It seems Master has sent her with a message," Suzuki said as the puppet glared at her harshly. "Well, get on with it." The puppet sent the Kunoichi one last glare before closing her eyes. Riaz and her group watched in confusion as she seemed to slump over. Suddenly her head snapped up. Her bright green eyes had been replaced by a pair of familiar brown. She opened her mouth and to their shock, Issei's voice flowed out. "The fallen angels are making their move," the doll spoke with her master's voice. "They intend to perform a ritual involving Asia, the nun. I can only assume it's to remove her sacred gear." "But removing someone's sacred gear would kill them," Riaz protested. "If it's for the greater good, sacrifices must be made," the doll replied. "Yuma has discovered that I'm a devil. She feels betrayed and is thinking irrationally. I fear she will go through with the ritual. I intend to reason with her and I need you to keep the others busy while I do so." "Very well, Issei-sama," Ashia nodded immediately. "I assume you want no casualties." "Exactly," the doll nodded. "They are not our enemies. The one we're after is whoever is leading them. And I'm assuming you don't wish for us to get involved with your lover's quarrel?" Riaz questioned. "The lovers," Chiho sputtered. "Yes, I have to deal with this myself," the doll said, ignoring the brown-haired girl's outburst. "We'll rendezvous at the foot of the hill." With that, the doll slumped over once again. "Well, there you have it," Chachizero said as she returned to normal. She crossed her arms, pouting. "I've got orders to stay here. The situation's too delicate for me to get involved. Or at least that's what Master says." "I'd have to say he's right," Tamamo muttered. She then motioned towards Suzuki. Only Mordred seemed to understand the gesture as she stood and promptly punched the black-haired girl in the face. Rias and her peerage watched in shock as the ninja suddenly seemed to pop into a puff of smoke. What? She was a cage bunshin, the fox explained as she prepared a transportation circle. A shadow clone? Akeno questioned curiously. A massive shadow formed around a chakra core, Tamamo said. Extremely difficult to tell apart from the original. But they can't take hits at all, Mordred commented as she stepped into the circle. Just pinching it on the cheek would make it pop. Then why didn't you? The blonde shrugged. I just felt like hitting something. Rias looked concerned. Shouldn't we inform Suzuki-san of what's happening? Oh, she already knows, Mordred said offhandedly. The clone transfers all the memories it gains to the original upon being destroyed, Morgiana said quietly. She'll meet us there. That's an extraordinarily useful technique, Rias muttered as she thought of the possibilities. Alright, we're ready to go, Tamamo announced to her fellow servants. We'll go with you, Rias said, standing. The fox raised an eyebrow at her. I owe that nun for helping Chiho here, and I don't like the idea of being in debt to a church associate. Yeah, right, Mordred muttered. Well, whatever, Tamamo sighed. Let's just go. I don't want to keep Master waiting. They gathered around the fox girl and disappeared in a flash of blue light. Issei glanced to his right as Suzuki appeared in a swirl of leaves beside him. Glad you could make it, he intoned, leaning against a tree. Master, she greeted. I take it you were off doing something else when your clone got the message. Issei asked as he stared at the church looming in the distance. The girl made an annoyed face. That gender-confused bitch punched me in the face, she growled. Issei chuckled at her expression. Well, try not to get too worked up over it, he said as a magic circle appeared on the ground before them. Master, Tamamo greeted. Suzuki glared at Mordred. We're sparring later, she growled. The blonde knight smirked at her. Yes, later, Issei stressed. He looked over at Ria's group and raised an eyebrow. I'm surprised you're here, Ria's senpai. Well, I owe it to the nun for helping Chiho, the Redid replied smoothly. Oh, really? Issei questioned in amusement. And it's not to have me owe you a favor. She smiled innocently. Well, whatever your reasons, as long as it makes this go smoother, I don't care. His face shifted into a frown. You will approach from the west. They'll confront you in order to buy time for Yuma. I'll be approaching from the south. You're going through the front door? Kiba asked in surprise. Issei simply nodded. Their numbers have been significantly reduced, he said. The only ones left are Middled, Kalwarner and Yuma herself. Donasik, Freed and the exorcists are otherwise incapacitated. We'll make a big show of appearing and draw them in by disguising our numbers, Rias nodded. Then we'll trap them within a barrier. With 4 spellcasters here it shouldn't be too much of an issue keeping them occupied. They'll likely submit when they realize you outnumber them 1-5, Issei said. Alright, let's go. Ray, are you sure you want to do this? Kalwarner asked worriedly as she watched her friend's actions. Earlier this evening she'd stormed back inside the church, practically dragging Asia behind her, and flatly told the older woman that she'd be performing the ritual. The black-haired girl glared at her. Yes, she growled. The girl turned her gaze to the blonde nun currently bound to the sacrificial altar. Something had obviously happened regarding Asia. Rainer seemed furious with the girl for some reason, and judging by the way she reacted whenever Issei's name was brought up, he had something to do with it as well. Hey, Middle called out as she entered the chamber. Devils are approaching. How many? The oldest of their group asked. About 2, maybe 3, the blonde replied. Kalwarner nodded. She turned to Rainer. We'll handle this, the blue-haired angel said. Ray, for the last time, are you? Yes. The younger girl hissed. Kalwarner flinched. Hey. Middle shouted. Don't take it out on her. It's fine, Middle, but it's fine, she took one last look at Rainer before following the blonde out the door. Once the door closed behind them, the black-haired angel strode up to the altar. Wake up, Asia, she said emotionlessly, snapping her fingers in the girl's face. The nun slowly blinked her eyes open. Yuma-san? She whispered. It's Rainer, the angel growled. Asia flinched. I wanted you to be awake while I extract your sacred gear. I want you to experience the same pain I felt when you and that bastard betrayed me. I don't understand. The blonde girl cried in confusion. What did I do? Shut up. Rainer hissed. Once again, Asia flinched. Compassing herself, the black-haired girl stepped away from her. She raised her arms towards her and began chanting. The ritual had begun. Well, what do we have here? Kalwarner asked mockingly. 2 lonely devils approaching our church. You're seriously trying to fight us on our home turf? Middle giggled. Wow, I didn't realize devils could be so stupid. They both angled downward, summoning spears of light as they dive-bombed the 2 girls. The devils looked up in alarm and barely had time to scream before they were impaled through the heart. Well, that was easy, the blonde angel remarked. Kalwarner narrowed her eyes. Too easy, she muttered. Which means, it's a trap. A voice called out. Was that what you were going to say? Boss, you'd be correct in that regard. Suddenly the two devil girls popped in a puff of smoke, leaving two very shocked fallen angels. I must say again, a crimson-haired girl said, stepping out of the shadows. Your Kage Bunshin no Jutsu is an incredibly useful technique, Suzuki-san. Just then, the area around them began to shimmer and distort. Surrounding them were not 2, not 3, but a whopping 10 devils. And your illusion spell was superb, Tamamo-san, Rias nodded appreciatively. Shit, middle paled. This is bad. Halloranor growled. What do you intend to do with us? Nothing, the Redid replied offhandedly. The angel girls blinked. Wait, what? The blonde angel asked incredulously. We're just here to keep you from interfering, Issei said coolly. Issei-sama wishes to speak with Yuma-san alone. Rainer's boyfriend is a devil, Middle shouted. Cowranor's eyes narrowed. And what does he intend to do with her? She asked. If he hurts her, I swear. You'll what? Tamamo asked, raising an eyebrow. Cowranor had no answer. She knew she couldn't possibly beat all of them. Not with the amount of power some of them were radiating. You can relax though. My master has no intention of harming her. The older woman perked up upon hearing that. Really? Yes, the fox girl nodded. It seems that despite the fact that they've been deceiving each other, my master has come to genuinely care for your friend. Unbelievable, Middle muttered. A devil and a fallen angel. Halloranor remained quiet for several moments. We surrender. She said. What? Middle shouted in shock. Cal. They have us completely outnumbered, outgunned and outclassed, Middle, the older woman sighed. And honestly, I just want Ray to be happy more than anything. And if that guy can do that, she looked Tamamo in the eye. You promise he won't hurt her? I swear it. Halloranor nodded. Thank you. And with that she turned her gaze towards the church. The others were quick to follow her example. Rainer watched quietly as the ritual ended. She stared, emotionless, as Asia's sacred gear fell into her hands. I'm so sorry, the blonde girl whispered. Rainer glanced at her. I'd be sorry too, she said flatly. If I knew I was about to die. Asia shook her head. No, she said weakly. I'm sorry that I put you through so much pain. The black-haired girl's eyes widened. What? Asia smiled at her. You said that I'd feel the same pain that you felt, she whispered. I can't believe that you felt this way, I'm so sorry. She coughed, her vision beginning to blur. I don't know what I did, she said quietly. But I'm happy. You're happy? Rainer asked in shocked voice. I'm happy that my death will take your pain away, Asia said, smiling her radiant smile. The same smile that captured both Issei's heart and Yuma's. The only thing I regret is that I never got the chance to spend more time with you and Issei-san. Asia. The blonde girl began gasping for breath. Rainer immediately released her from her bonds and caught her before she hit the floor. And despite it all, the girl was still smiling. Please don't be mad at Issei-san, she whispered. He didn't tell me until yesterday. He's the one who saved me, so please don't hate him. The black-haired girl could feel tears burning in her eyes. Why don't you hate me? I could never hate you, Asia smiled. You and Issei-san were my first friends. I love you. And I know deep in my heart that Issei-san loves you, Yuma-san. Asia. She cried as the girl's eyes began to flutter closed. I'm sorry. Asia. Yuma shouted, shaking the unresponsive girl in her arms. Oh, God, she whispered as her tears fell. She vaguely registered someone stepping next to her, but she was too exhausted to care. It seems I was too late, Issei said softly. She couldn't even muster the energy to look up at him. Why? She asked. Because Asia was right, he replied. I love you. How could you love me? The black-haired girl muttered. We're enemies. You're a devil and I'm a fallen angel. Tell me, Yuma, he said, placing a finger at her chin and making her look at him. Would you say you loved me before you knew I was a devil? She looked away. Yes. Then why does it matter what we are? Issei asked. I may have lied to you about what I am, but I never lied to you about the kind of person I am. He stepped away from her and raised his arms to the side. This is who I am, a student at Kuo Academy and #1 employee at McDonald's. Why, Yuma muttered, a trace of a smile on her lips. Why did I have to fall in love with an idiot like you? She sighed, any hint of humor gone. I suppose neither of us were very honest with each other. She looked up at him. So you weren't just playing with me? You really love me? Issei's response was to kiss her. Does that answer your question? He asked after pulling away and seeing her flushed face. Why aren't you angry? The fallen angel asked. I just killed Asia. You speak as though she'll stay dead, Issei said with a small smirk. Her eyes widened. Why, you can bring her back. She breathed. He nodded. Taking Yuma's hand, he retrieved Asia's sacred gear and frowned. I recognize this, he muttered. It's twilight healing. No wonder the fallen angels wanted it. Yuma hesitated. Kakabiel-sama won't be happy, she whispered. Oh ho? Issei smirked. So he's the one who was giving you orders. Yuma nodded solemnly. Wow, what perfect timing. A voice called out. Issei and Yuma both spun around to see a magic circle appearing on the ground behind them. "They Azazel-sama." Yuma squeaked. The governor gave her a mock salute. "Yo, Rainer-chan." he exclaimed. "I was just about to tell you myself, Issei-kun." Issei raised an eyebrow at him. "You mean you just now found out?" Azazel scowled at his tone. "Hey, apparently Kakabiel is smarter than he looks," he defended himself. "He cast a complex spell on his subordinates that prevents them from telling me. I didn't want to alert the traitor to my snooping by involving a third party, so it took me until just now to get past the spell." The brown-haired boy raised his arms in surrender. "Alright, I get it, calm down," he muttered. "Azazel-sama?" Yuma asked in confusion. "What's going on?" "Ah, sorry, Rainer-chan," the governor said. "There's a traitor among the Grigori, and I ask Issei-kun here to help me determine who it is." She turned to Issei with a look of shock gracing her face. "Why you're working with Azazel-sama?" Issei smiled at her. "Like I said, Yuma," he patted her head. "Our factions don't matter. I've been friends with Azazel here for a long time now. Your friend Onisik. I brought him to Azazel for questioning. And he told me today that Kakabiel was the one giving orders," Azazel said with a frown. "Hey, Kakabiel-sama is a traitor." Yuma stuttered. I'm sorry, Azazel-sama, I had no idea." "I know," the governor sighed. He glanced at Asia on the ground. "Were you planning on reincarnating her?" "I was, but I think I have a better idea," Issei nodded. "Rias. I know you're there. Come out, it's fine." There was silence for several moments before Rias and her peerage stepped through the chamber doors, a tense look on their faces as they eyed Azazel warily. Issei's servants followed shortly with Kalwarner and Middleton custody. "Did you need something, Issei-kun?" Rias questioned. He nodded. He gestured at Asia. "This girl is the one who saved Chiho. She's the user of Twilight Healing. I believe she'd be a good addition to your peerage." Rias raised an eyebrow. "You're just giving her to me?" "Ice?" Yuma asked in concern. He smiled at her. "It's fine," he whispered. He turned back to Rias. "Of course, I'll expect a favor." He grinned. Rias sighed before smiling. "Very well then, I'll make her my bishop.iou, Issei-kun." "Bishop?" Yuma asked in confusion. In response, Rias withdrew a bishop piece from her pocket. Issei slipped Asia's Twilight Healing onto her fingers and stood back. Rias placed the evil piece directly over Asia's chest and stood. The bright red magic circle appeared beneath the nun, and Rias began to speak. "In the name of the House of Gremory, I, Rias Gremory hereby order you, Asia Argento. Return to this world and serve in my name." The light became blinding as the ritual neared its end. When the light faded, the bishop piece had disappeared into Asia's flesh. Slowly, the blonde girl began fluttering her eyes open. What?" she whispered. She blinked up at Issei. "Issei-san." she cried, grabbing him in a hug. "I don't believe it," Yuma whispered in awe. "The devils can bring back the dead. So that's how it works, eh?" Azazel muttered. "Fascinating." "Yuma-san?" Asia asked. The black-haired girl waved at her nervously. "Yuma-san." The blonde didn't hesitate to reach over and pull her into the hug. "Why you're not angry?" Yuma whispered. Asia shook her head, smiling. "You're my precious friend, Yuma-san," she said sincerely. "I can never be angry at you." "Hey Asia," she hugged her back. "I'm so sorry." "I forgive you," the nun whispered in return. Issei broke away from the hug and stood to face Azazel. "Well, what do you intend to do now?" he questioned. "This needs to be handled delicately," Azazel frowned. He turned to Yuma who was still being hugged by Asia. "And Kakabiel won't be pleased when he finds out who ratted him out. I'll have to place them all in protective custody." What?" Asia asked, frightened as Ashia brought Kalwarner and Middlet over to them. "But," Issei sighed. "I'm sorry, Asia," he patted her on the head. "But it needs to happen to keep them safe." But." Yuma hugged the blonde, who returned the gesture fiercely. "I'm sorry, Asia-chan," she whispered. "I promise, I'll see you again one day." Yuma-san, the black-haired girl broke away from her. She stood and faced Issei. "I'm sorry to you too, Issei," she said softly as Azazel prepared a transport circle behind her. "So am I, Yuma," Issei said softly. The girl leaned forward, kissing him one last time before stepping back. "Goodbye, Ice-kun." They watched in solemn silence as the four fallen angels disappeared in a flash of light. "Goodbye, Yuma-chan." End of season 1. Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown in left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye. Post-credit. Issei sighed as he sat at his desk, causing his servants glanced at him worriedly. He'd been unusually quiet and solemn ever since Yuma left. They tried cheering him up, but the brown-haired boy remained unresponsive. Despite the short amount of time he'd spent with the black-haired girl, he'd grown quite fond of her. "But it's for the best," Issei mused to himself as he gazed out the window. "Master?" If Kakabiel found out who'd sold him out, I've no doubt he'd retaliate. Hey master. But I can't help but miss her, he bemoaned. And Asia obviously misses her as well. Master. Issei felt a wad of paper hit him in the face. What? He demanded, glaring at Mordred. I'm trying to sulk here. The blonde merely motioned to the front of the class. For those of you who weren't paying attention, I'll say it again, a familiar woman said at the head of the class. My name is Kalwerner and starting today I'll be your new homeroom teacher. She strode over to the desk and sat down. And as my first act as teacher, I'd like for our new transfer student to introduce herself. Issei watched in disbelief as a very familiar black-haired girl strode into the classroom. Hello, everyone. The girl smiled. I'm Amano Yuma, Ice-kun's girlfriend. Please take care of me. Eh?